Carl Richter slammed his fist on the mahogany desk so hard that the crystal decanter of scotch rattled. "Find that locomotive," he snarled into the phone, his German accent thickening with rage. "I don't care if you have to burn down every salvage yard in Ohio. My grandfather died protecting what's inside that train, and some broken-down Navy SEAL is not going to steal 70 years of my family's work." He ended the call and stared at the faded photograph on his desk. SS Oberfuhrer Heinrich Richter, standing beside Engine 552 in 1945 days, before American forces captured everything. 70 years of searching, 70 years of waiting, and now some bankrupt veteran had stumbled onto the secret that could destroy the Richter dynasty forever, or make Carl the richest man in 3 continents. "Get me my security team," he said quietly. "We're going to Ohio, and this time, we're not leaving witnesses." Before we continue this incredible story, I want to invite you to subscribe to our channel and follow this journey to the very end. Drop a comment below telling me which city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel across the Marcus Cole had not slept in 3 days. He stood at his kitchen window at 4 in the morning, watching darkness slowly surrender to the gray light of an Ohio dawn. His 3rd cup of black coffee had gone cold in his hands. He did not notice. He did not care. The house around him felt like a tomb. Elena's photographs still hung on every wall. Her reading glasses still sat on the counter where she had left them the morning the ambulance came. Her jasmine perfume still lingered in corners of rooms he could not bring himself to enter. 2 years. She had been gone 2 years, and Marcus still expected to hear her voice every time he walked through the door. His phone buzzed on the counter. Another bill collector. Another threatening letter converted to voicemail. Another reminder that the life he had built was crumbling faster than he could hold it together. He ignored it. The footsteps on the stairs told him Sophia was awake. He straightened his shoulders automatically. 14 years of Navy SEAL training had taught him to project strength even when he felt none. His daughter did not need to see him falling apart. "You didn't sleep again." Her voice carried accusation and concern in equal measure. Marcus turned to face her. 16 years old, auburn hair like her mother, dark circles under brown eyes that had aged far too much in the past 2 years. She stood in the kitchen doorway wearing her school uniform backpack already on her shoulder. "I slept." "You're a terrible liar, Dad. You always have been." She walked past him to pour herself coffee. A year ago, he would have objected to a 16-year-old drinking coffee. Now he said nothing. They had both stopped pretending that normal rules applied to their lives. "Mrs. Henderson called again yesterday," Sophia said without looking at him. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. "I know." "She said we have 12 days. 12 days before they start foreclosure proceedings." "I said I know." "Do you?" "Because you've been spending every night staring at Grandpa's old railroad maps like they're going to magically produce money." Sophia finally turned to face him. Her eyes held something worse than anger. They held disappointment. "Mom's been dead 2 years. Grandpa's been dead 21 years. When are you going to stop living in the past and figure out how to save our future?" The words hit Marcus like shrapnel. He wanted to explain. He wanted to tell her about the dreams that had been haunting him for weeks. Dreams of his father's voice telling him to find the train. Dreams of Elena begging him not to give up. Dreams that felt less like imagination and more like instructions. But how did you explain that to a practical 16-year-old who was watching her world collapse? "I'm working on something," he said instead. "Working on what you've applied to 37 jobs in the past 6 months. Nobody wants to hire a 44-year-old veteran with..." She stopped herself, but Marcus heard the word she did not say, PTSD. Nobody wanted to hire the broken soldier who sometimes woke up screaming, who sometimes could not leave the house for days, who sometimes sat in the darkness for hours trapped in memories of friends who had died in places that did not officially exist. "I'm working on something," he repeated. "Trust me." "Trust you." Sophia's laugh held no humor. "Dad, I love you, but trusting you hasn't exactly worked out lately." She grabbed her backpack and headed for the door. "Sophia, wait." She paused but did not turn around. "I know things have been hard. I know I haven't been the father you deserve. But I need you to believe me when I tell you that I'm going to fix this. I'm going to find a way." Sophia stood motionless for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. "Mom believed you when you said that. And then she died, waiting for things to get better. I can't do that, Dad. I can't wait anymore." The door closed behind her with a sound that felt like finality. Marcus stood alone in the kitchen that still smelled like his dead wife's perfume, surrounded by photographs of a family that no longer existed, holding a cup of cold coffee that he had forgotten he was holding. His phone buzzed again. This time he looked at it. Henderson's salvage yard. His heart began to beat faster. 3 days ago, old Jim Henderson had called with strange news. He had found something while clearing inventory. Something connected to Marcus's father, William Cole, who had worked the railroad for 43 years before a heart attack took him when Marcus was 23. "Your daddy used to come by sometimes," Jim had said, "back when I was just learning the business from my old man. He'd look at that locomotive like it was a woman he loved. Never said why, but before he died, he told my father that if anyone ever came asking about Engine 552, we should make sure it ended up with you." Marcus had dismissed it as the ramblings of an old man living in the past, but the dreams had not stopped, and his father's voice had grown louder every night. He answered the phone. "Marcus, Jim Henderson, you still thinking about what we talked about?" "I'm thinking." "Well, think faster. Got a railroad collector from Chicago coming tomorrow. Deep pockets. Says he'll pay $40,000 cash for the locomotive. If you want her, it's now or never." Marcus closed his eyes. $40,000. That was more than 10 times what he could afford to pay. Jim had quoted him $3,500, every penny remaining in their checking account. Money that should go toward the mortgage. Money that represented the difference between keeping their home and losing everything. "I'll be there in an hour." He ended the call before Jim could respond. The salvage yard was 40 minutes outside Ridgemont, but Marcus made it in 30. He had not driven this fast since his last combat deployment when speed meant the difference between life and death. Jim Henderson was waiting outside the main office, 76 years old with hands like leather and eyes that had seen enough to keep quiet about most of it. "Thought you might not come," Jim said. "Thought about it." And Marcus looked past Jim toward the rear of the salvage yard. He could not see the locomotive from here, but he could feel it. Could feel something pulling at him like a hook in his chest. "Show me." They walked in silence through 12 acres of rusted dreams. Abandoned cars, obsolete farm equipment, the skeletal remains of Ridgemont's industrial past. Everything that people had thrown away when it stopped being useful. Marcus knew the feeling. The locomotive sat on a section of track behind a pile of scrap metal hidden from casual view. Engine 552, Baltimore and Ohio freight, built March 1943. She looked like death. Rust covered her black paint like a disease. Weeds grew through gaps in her undercarriage. Birds had built nests in her smokestack. She had not moved under her own power in decades. But Marcus did not see decay. He saw his father's hands moving over similar machinery on Saturday mornings in the workshop. He saw his father's face lit by kerosene lanterns during their nighttime walks through the rail yard. He saw his father's eyes holding secrets that he had carried to his grave. "She's been here 11 years, Jim said. Bought her from B&O when they were scrapping the old steam engines. Always meant to restore her, never got around to it." Marcus walked slowly around the locomotive. His SEAL training kicked in automatically. Grid pattern examination, systematic documentation of every detail, looking for what did not belong. And he found it. Scratches on certain panels that formed patterns. Bolts painted over to match surrounding surfaces. A section of the back wall that sounded hollow when he tapped it with his knuckles. This locomotive was more than it appeared. "Your daddy used to say these engines had souls," Jim continued. "Said if you listened close enough, they'd tell you their stories." Marcus stopped walking. He placed his palm flat against the locomotive's side. The metal was cold despite the morning sun, cold like a body in a morgue. But underneath that coldness, he felt something else. Waiting. "I'll take her." Jim raised an eyebrow. "You got $3,500? "I've got everything I have left." "Son, I've got a buyer coming tomorrow who'll pay $40,000. I'm not running a charity here." Marcus turned to face the old man. 20 years of combat operations had taught him to read people, to see past words into intentions, to know when someone was negotiating and when they were stating facts. Jim Henderson was neither. He was testing. "My father told your father something before he died," Marcus said quietly. "Something about this locomotive, something that made him promise to make sure it ended up with me if anyone ever came asking." Jim's expression did not change, but something flickered in his eyes. "What makes you think your daddy told mine anything?" "Because you called me 3 days ago, because you knew my father was connected to this train even though he's been dead for 21 years. Because you quoted me $3,500 when you could have asked for 10 times that." Marcus stepped closer. "What did he tell him, Jim? What's so special about Engine 552? The salvage yard fell silent. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. Jim Henderson looked at the locomotive for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, older, heavier. Your daddy was the best man I ever knew. He never asked for recognition, never wanted credit. He just believed that some jobs were too important to abandon. Jim turned back to Marcus. He told my father that someday somebody would come asking about this train, and when they did, we'd know that person was ready to finish what he started. Finish what? I don't know. He never said, just that it was important enough to spend his whole life protecting, important enough to pass down to whoever came next. Marcus looked at the locomotive again. Rusted, abandoned, worthless by any reasonable measure, but his father had spent a lifetime protecting it, and William Cole had never done anything without reason. $3,500, Marcus said. I'll have the check to you before noon. Jim nodded slowly. I'll throw in 50 feet of track, enough to make her look proper if you decide to display her somewhere. I'm not planning to display her. No, I don't suppose you are. Marcus drove home faster than he had driven to the salvage yard. His mind raced with questions he could not answer. His heart pounded with a certainty he could not explain. The answers were in that locomotive. He knew it like he knew his own name. The house was empty when he arrived. Sophia was at school. The silence pressed against him like a physical weight. He sat down at the kitchen table and opened his laptop. Their bank account balance glowed on the screen like an accusation. $3,547.42, enough to buy the locomotive, not enough to save their house. Marcus stared at the number for a long time. He thought about Sophia's face when she learned what he had done. He thought about the foreclosure notice sitting on his desk. He thought about Elena's voice in his dreams begging him not to give up. He thought about his father. William Cole had worked the railroad for 43 years, had raised a family on a railroad man's salary, had never asked for anything he did not earn, but he had also spent decades protecting a secret connected to Engine 552, a secret important enough to pass down through generations, a secret that had brought Marcus to this moment. His finger hovered over the keyboard. This was insane. This was financial suicide. This was the act of a man who had finally lost his grip on reality. Marcus transferred the money. The confirmation screen appeared. Transaction complete. Available balance $47.82. He had just spent their last savings on a rusted locomotive that had not moved in decades. And somewhere deep inside him, something that had been broken for 2 years finally felt whole. His phone rang. Sophia? He answered. Dad, Jenny Patterson just texted me. His daughter's voice shook with fury. She said you bought a train. A train. Is that true? Marcus closed his eyes. Yes. With what money? Our money. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for an eternity. I can't do this anymore. Sophia's voice cracked. I can't watch you destroy what's left of our family because you're chasing ghosts. Mom is gone. Grandpa is gone. Buying a stupid train isn't going to bring them back. Sophia, listen to me. No, you listen. I've been covering for you for 2 years, making excuses to teachers, telling neighbors you're fine when we both know you're falling apart. But this is too far, Dad. This is the end. There's something in that locomotive, something your grandfather spent his whole life protecting. I need you to trust me. Trust you? Her laugh was bitter. That's what Mom said before she died. Trust your father, Sophia. He always figures things out. Well, she was wrong, and I'm done waiting for you to prove her right. The call ended. Marcus sat alone in the kitchen, staring at his phone's blank screen. He had just lost his daughter's faith. He had just spent their last money on a train. He had just bet everything on a feeling he could not explain, and now he needed to prove that the feeling was right. He drove back to the salvage yard that evening after darkness had fallen. Jim Henderson had left a key to the gate under a rock near the entrance, along with a note that said simply, "Your daddy would be proud." Marcus was not sure proud was the right word. He climbed into the locomotive's cab with his father's kerosene lantern, the same one William Cole had carried during their walks through the rail yard when Marcus was young. Electric flashlights were too harsh, his father used to say. Kerosene let you see what really mattered. Railroad lantern. Shows you the truth, his father's voice echoed in his memory. Electric light just shows you what's there. The soft flame cast dancing shadows across the cab's interior. Marcus began his examination with the same methodical precision he had used clearing hostile structures in Afghanistan. Grid pattern. Systematic coverage. Document everything. The scratches he had noticed earlier formed a pattern when viewed in the lantern's soft light. They pointed toward the back wall of the cab, toward the section that had sounded hollow when he tapped it. Marcus examined the wall more closely. The bolts holding a particular panel had been painted over to match the surrounding metal, but the paint was slightly different in color, slightly newer. Someone had modified this locomotive after it was built. Someone had hidden something behind this wall. Using tools from his father's old kit, Marcus carefully removed the bolts. The panel came away to reveal a hidden compartment. His hands were steady. 20 years of defusing bombs and conducting covert operations had taught him to control his body even when his mind was racing. Inside the compartment, wrapped in oiled canvas that had preserved it for decades, was a manila envelope. Marcus opened it with surgical precision. The first document was a cargo manifest dated April 15, 1943. Baltimore Processing Center to Midwest Distribution Point, classification restricted. Below that, a list of items that made no sense, personal effects category AM, artwork classification pending, precious metals assay required, documents historical significance. Marcus turned to the next document. Photographs. Dozens of them. Black and white images showing railroad workers loading wooden crates into freight cars. Warehouses filled with paintings, sculptures, religious artifacts. And in several photographs, a young man's face that Marcus recognized immediately. William Cole, his father, standing beside Engine 552 with a group of other railroad workers, all of them loading crates marked with symbols Marcus did not recognize. His father had been part of something secret, something that had continued for decades after the war, something connected to items worth enough that a family in Germany was still searching for them 70 years later. Marcus's hands began to shake as he pulled out the final document in the envelope, a letter in his father's handwriting, addressed to him. Son, if you're reading this, you found the locomotive and understood enough to look for the truth. What we did during the war was necessary, but it was incomplete. The government asked us to transport recovered assets, things the Nazis had stolen from Jewish families across Europe. Some of it made it back to the rightful owners. Most of it didn't. Bureaucracy, politics, indifference. Engine 552 was part of a network that kept these items safe until they could be properly returned. I was supposed to finish the job, but life got in the way. The mission outlived me. The items are still out there, still waiting. If you choose to continue what I started, but remember, this isn't about money. It's about returning what was stolen to people who lost everything. The map is in the firebox behind the right side brick. Be careful who you trust. Some people have been looking for what we hid for 70 years. I'm proud of the man you became. Your mother would be too. Finish this, son. Finish what we started. Dad. Marcus read the letter 3 times. His father had not just worked on trains during the war. He had been part of a secret network protecting stolen Holocaust assets. He had spent his entire life guarding treasures that belonged to families who had lost everything, and now that mission belonged to Marcus. The kerosene lantern flickered, as if responding to the weight of what he had discovered. 187 million in stolen assets. 47 families waiting for justice. 70 years of secrets, and a man named Carl Richter who was willing to kill to keep them buried. Marcus folded the letter carefully and placed it in his pocket. He had just found the answer to every question that had haunted him for 2 years, and he had just discovered that the real danger was only beginning. 3,000 miles away in a mansion overlooking Lake Geneva, Carl Richter received a phone call that made his blood turn cold. He found the first compartment, Brennan's voice said through the secure line. He's got the letter and the photographs. Richter closed his eyes. 70 years. His grandfather had died protecting what was in that locomotive. His father had spent decades trying to locate it, and now Carl had finally traced it to a salvage yard in Ohio, only to have some bankrupt veteran stumble onto it first. How much does he know, Em? Enough to start asking questions, not enough to find the main caches. Yet, Brennan agreed. Richter walked to the window and stared out at the lake. The water was calm, peaceful. Everything his life was about to stop being. Assemble the team. Full operational package. I want surveillance on Cole and everyone he talks to. I want intercepts on his communications. I want to know what he eats, what he drinks, and what he dreams about. And if he finds more, Richter's reflection stared back at him from the glass. Cold, ruthless, the grandson of a man who had built an empire on stolen treasures. Then we make sure he doesn't live to tell anyone about it. He ended the call and turned to the photograph on his desk. SS Oberfuhrer Heinrich Richter, standing beside Engine 5FV2, days before the Americans captured everything. Don't worry, grandfather, Carl whispered. I won't let them take what belongs to us. I'll destroy anyone who tries. The next morning, Marcus woke from the first peaceful sleep he had experienced in months. No nightmares, no screaming, just his father's voice saying 2 words over and over until they became a heartbeat. Finish this. He found Sophia in the kitchen already dressed for school. She did not look at him when he entered. I know you're angry, Marcus said. Angry doesn't begin to cover it. But I need to show you something that changes everything. Nothing changes anything, Dad. You spent our last money on a train. We're going to lose our house. Those are facts. They don't change. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out his father's letter. Read this. Sophia stared at the worn paper for a long moment. Her expression shifted from anger to confusion to something that looked like the beginning of wonder. This is Grandpa's handwriting. Yes. He wrote this to you about the locomotive. Yes. He says there are items hidden somewhere. Items worth... He doesn't say how much. I've done some research. Based on what the documents describe, we're looking at assets valued at over $100 million. Sophia's head snapped up. That's impossible. Read the rest. Read about what he and the other railroad workers did during the war. Read about why they hid these items instead of turning them over to the government. Sophia read. Her lips moved slightly as she absorbed each word. When she finished, her eyes were wet. Grandpa was protecting Holocaust victims' belongings, all those years, all those nights working late. He wasn't just a railroad engineer, he was a guardian. He and his friends spent 30 years returning what they could and protecting what they couldn't. And he left the mission to me. Sophia set the letter down carefully. Her hands were trembling. Dad, if this is real, it's real. If this is real, then we're not just talking about money. We're talking about families. Real families who lost everything during the Holocaust, who have been searching for their heritage for 70 years. Marcus nodded. 47 families, according to the documents I found. 47 families whose treasures your grandfather protected because he believed that someday someone would be able to return them. Sophia was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was different, softer, the voice of the daughter he remembered from before Elena died. What do we need to do? First, we find the map your grandfather mentioned. Then we figure out where everything is hidden. Then we start the process of returning items to the families they belong to. And the people who are looking for this stuff, the ones Grandpa warned you about. Marcus thought about Carl Richter, about the 70 years of searching, about the lengths people would go to protect fortunes built on stolen property. We deal with them when we have to, but first we find what your grandfather hid. We finish what he started. Sophia picked up the letter again and read the final lines. I'm proud of the man you became. Your mother would be too. Fit. She looked at her father with eyes that were finally seeing him clearly. He believed in you, even after everything. He believed you would be the one to finish his mission. Your grandmother used to say that some things skip a generation, that sometimes children can't understand their parents until they become parents themselves. Do you understand him now, Grandpa, I mean? Do you understand why he spent his whole life protecting these things instead of telling anyone about them? Marcus thought about the question carefully. I think he understood something that most people never learn. That some jobs are too important to abandon. That some promises have to be kept even when keeping them costs everything. That some treasures aren't measured in money. Sophia smiled. It was the first real smile he had seen on her face in months. Mom would have loved this story. Your mother would have been furious at me for spending our last money on a train. Yeah, but then she would have helped you figure out how to make it work. That's what she always did. That's what she always did. They stood in silence for a moment, surrounded by Elena's photographs and the weight of everything they had lost. Then Sophia picked up her backpack. I have to go to school, but when I get home, I want to see everything. The documents, the photographs, all of it. You're not angry anymore. I'm terrified. I'm confused. I don't understand how any of this is possible. She paused at the door. But I'm not angry, because for the first time in 2 years, I feel like we have a purpose, like there's a reason for all of this. There is. Your grandfather made sure of that. Sophia left for school. Marcus stood alone in the kitchen, holding his father's letter, feeling the weight of generations pressing down on his shoulders. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered. Mr. Cole. The voice was calm, professional, utterly cold. My name is Carl Richter. I believe you have something that belongs to my family. Marcus felt ice form in his stomach. I don't know what you're talking about. Engine 552, the documents inside. The items my grandfather was transporting when your government illegally seized his property. Richter's voice hardened. I've been searching for those materials for 40 years, Mr. Cole. I am not going to stop now. Your grandfather was an SS officer. The items he was transporting were stolen from families he helped murder. Those families are dead. Their claims died with them. What remains is property, Mr. Cole, and property belongs to those with the will and resources to possess it. I disagree. Then you will suffer the consequences of that disagreement. Richter paused. I know where your daughter goes to school, Mr. Cole. I know the route she walks home. I know that you are alone, unemployed, and financially desperate. Do not make this more difficult than it needs to be. The line went dead. Marcus stood motionless, the phone still pressed to his ear. Carl Richter had just threatened his daughter. Carl Richter had just declared war, and Marcus Cole, broken veteran, failed father, and last guardian of his father's mission, felt something he had not felt in 2 years. Rage. The kind of rage that had kept him alive through 14 years of combat operations. The kind of rage that made enemies disappear. The kind of rage that said you chose the wrong man to threaten. He dialed a number he had not called in 3 years. Jake, it's Marcus. I need your help. Brother, I've been waiting for that call. What do you need? Everything, the full team, as fast as you can get here. How much trouble are we talking about? Marcus looked at his father's letter, at the photographs of families murdered for their heritage, at the mission that had just become personal, the kind of trouble that ends careers or lives. Your choice which? Jake's laugh came through the phone like a promise. I've always preferred the second option. Send me the coordinates. We'll be there by tomorrow. Marcus ended the call and walked to the window. Somewhere out there, Carl Richter was preparing to take everything his family had stolen from Holocaust victims. Somewhere out there, 47 families were still waiting for justice. Somewhere out there, his father's legacy was waiting to be completed. Marcus Cole had spent 2 years drowning in grief and failure, but that was over now. The war had begun, and this time he intended to win. Jake Harrison arrived in Ridgemont 18 hours after Marcus made the call. He drove a black pickup truck with tinted windows and brought with him 2 other men whose names did not appear on any government database. Danny Reeves stepped out of the passenger side first, tall, quiet, with eyes that never stopped moving. He had been the best sniper in their unit, capable of putting a bullet through a quarter at 800 yards. Now he ran a security consulting firm in Cleveland that asked no questions and left no records. Miguel Santos emerged from the back seat, shorter than the others, built like a compressed spring with hands that had saved more lives than they had taken. Combat medic, close-quarters specialist, the kind of man who could kill you with a pen or save your life with a shoelace. Marcus met them in front of his house at 6 in the morning before Sophia woke for school. You look like death, Jake said, embracing him. Feeling better than I look. That's not saying much, brother. Danny shook Marcus's hand without speaking. He never spoke unless necessary. It was one of the things that made him invaluable. Miguel hugged Marcus hard enough to crack ribs. 2 years without a call. 2 years. I thought you were dead. Almost was. Few times. Elena. Cancer. 2 years ago. Miguel's expression shifted. I'm sorry. She was the best of us. She was. They stood in silence for a moment. 4 men who had bled together in places that did not exist. 4 men who had kept each other alive when everyone else wanted them dead. So, Jake said finally. Tell us about the Nazi who threatened your daughter. Marcus told them everything. The locomotive, the hidden compartment, his father's letter, the cargo manifest, the photographs of railroad workers loading stolen treasures, the 70 years of protection, the 47 families still waiting for justice, and Carl Richter, grandson of SS Oberfuhrer Heinrich Richter. 40 years of searching, unlimited resources, a phone call that promised violence. When Marcus finished, Jake let out a low whistle. So we're talking about $100 million in Holocaust assets hidden across 3 states, protected by a network of railroad workers for 7 decades, and now some Nazi's grandson wants to steal it all before you can return it to the families it belongs to. That's the situation. And he threatened Sophia. Yes. Jake looked at Danny and Miguel. Something passed between them, an understanding that required no words. What's the operational priority? Protect Sophia, find the hidden caches before Richter does, return the items to their rightful owners. And Richter himself? Marcus's jaw tightened. We deal with him when we have to. When, not if. When? Danny spoke for the first time. I've already started background research. Richter has a security team. Former military contractors. 6 men well-equipped, professionally trained. They arrived in Ohio 3 days ago and set up at the Ridgemont Motor Lodge. How do you know that? Because I've been tracking him since you called. His team placed monitoring equipment on this house and on the salvage yard. They've been watching you for at least 72 hours. Marcus felt cold settle into his bones. Richter had been watching, had seen him find the compartment, had probably heard his conversations with Sophia. Can you neutralize the surveillance? Already done. Replace their feeds with loops. They're watching recordings of you doing nothing while we have this conversation. Miguel grinned. Danny doesn't sleep. It's why his wife left him. She left because I was boring, not because I didn't sleep. You're both, Jake said. Marcus, what's our timeline? I don't know how much Richter knows about the cache locations. My father's map is hidden in the Locomotive, but there might be copies. Other members of the network who talked. We need to move fast. Then let's start with the map. They drove to the salvage yard in Danny's truck. The sun was barely up, casting long shadows across the rusted machinery and abandoned dreams. Engine 552 looked different in the early light, less like decay and more like patience, like something that had been waiting for exactly this moment. Marcus climbed into the cab with Jake while Danny established a perimeter and Miguel checked for additional surveillance equipment. Your father's letter said the map is in the firebox, Jake reminded him, behind the right side brick. The firebox was cold and dark, filled with decades of ash and debris. Marcus used his father's kerosene lantern to illuminate the interior, just as his father would have done. The right side brick looked identical to all the others, but when Marcus pressed it, he felt movement, a slight give that the other bricks did not have. He worked carefully using tools from his father's kit to loosen the mortar without damaging whatever lay behind. The brick came free. Inside the hidden space was a waterproof container sealed and preserved. Marcus opened it with hands that trembled despite his training. A folded document, hand-drawn with the precision of an engineer, covered in annotations and updates spanning decades. The map, 17 primary locations across Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois, 6 backup sites. GPS coordinates added in pencil during the 1990s, updated as recently as 2003. His father had been maintaining this map until just before his death. My God, Jake breathed, looking over Marcus's shoulder. He documented everything, every hiding place, every item, every family it belonged to. Marcus unfolded the accompanying papers, inventory lists, provenance documentation, photographs of items with detailed descriptions, Rosenberg collection, silver menorah ceremonial items, family jewelry, Goldberg collection, artwork including paintings by Isaac Goldberg himself, Weissman collection, religious texts dating back 8 generations, 47 families, hundreds of items, all preserved, all waiting. What's that? Jake pointed to a notation on the map, a location marked differently from the others, circled 3 times in red ink. Primary repository, Marcus read. Main cache, most valuable items, historical evidence. Do not access without full operational security. Historical evidence. Marcus turned to the next page of documentation, and his blood turned cold. Photographs of Heinrich Richter, SS uniform, standing beside crates being loaded onto trains, signing documents that authorized the seizure of Jewish property, corresponding with other Nazi officers about the efficient liquidation of cultural assets, evidence of war crimes, evidence that had never been used because the man died before facing justice, evidence that could still destroy the Richter family. That's why Carl Richter is so desperate, Marcus said slowly. It's not just about the money, it's about this. Evidence that his grandfather was a war criminal. Evidence that could trigger investigations into how the Richter fortune was built. Evidence that could put him in prison if it proves the family knowingly profited from Holocaust theft for 70 years. Marcus looked at the map again, at the red-circled location that held the most dangerous secrets. We need to get there first. How far? 40 miles south, abandoned limestone mine. Jake checked his watch. We can be there in an hour. Not yet. Sophia doesn't know what's happening. I need to talk to her first. Marcus, if Richter is watching... Danny said the surveillance is neutralized. For now, but we don't know what other assets he has in play. Marcus thought about his daughter, about the fear in her voice when she read about Richter's threats, about the trust she had placed in him that morning when she decided to believe. I'm not leaving her alone without telling her what's happening. I won't do to her what the Navy did to Elena." Jake studied his friend's face for a long moment. 20 minutes. Then we move. Sophia was eating breakfast when Marcus returned to the house. She looked up with eyes that held equal parts hope and fear. "Did you find it? The map?" "I found it." Marcus sat down across from her. "I also found out evidence that Carl Richter's grandfather was directly involved in war crimes. That's why Richter is so desperate to recover these materials. He's not just protecting stolen treasure, he's protecting his family's criminal legacy." "He threatened me, Dad. You told me that on the phone last night." "I did." "So what are we going to do?" Marcus gestured toward the window. Outside, Jake leaned against his truck, watching the street with the casual alertness of a predator. "Those men outside, they served with me in the SEALs. They came as soon as I called. They're going to help me find the hidden caches before Richter does. And me, am I supposed to just sit here and wait? You're supposed to go to school, act normal. Don't let anyone know that anything has changed. While you go off on some secret mission that might get you killed." "Sophia, no, Dad, I'm not doing this again." Her voice cracked. "I watched Mom die slowly because she didn't tell me how sick she was. I'm not going to watch you disappear without knowing what's happening." Marcus looked at his daughter, at the woman she was becoming, at the strength she had inherited from Elena. "There's a man named Pete Morrison. He runs a garage on Main Street. His father was part of your grandfather's network. He knows things about this operation that no one else knows. You want me to talk to him. I want you to learn from him. Everything he knows about what your grandfather did. Everything about the families who are waiting. Everything that can help us finish this mission." Sophia's expression shifted. "You're giving me a job. I'm giving you a purpose. The same purpose your grandfather gave me." She was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded. "I'll find him. I'll learn everything he knows. Be careful. Richter has people watching. Even if we've neutralized some of his surveillance, we don't know what else he has." "Dad." Sophia stood and walked around the table to embrace him. "I spent 2 years being angry at you for falling apart. But you weren't falling apart. You were waiting. Waiting for something important enough to put you back together. Your mother used to say something similar. Mom was usually right about you." Sophia stepped back. "Go find what Grandpa hid. I'll hold things together here." Marcus left with his team 20 minutes later. The drive south took them through Ohio farmland that had not changed much since his father's time. Rolling hills, fading barns. Towns that had seen better days and accepted that better days were not coming back. Jake drove while Danny monitored communications as Miguel prepared equipment. "Richter's team hasn't moved from the motel, as Danny reported. But there's been increased radio traffic. They're planning something. How long until they realize the surveillance feeds are looped? Hard to say. Could be hours, could be minutes. Depends on how closely they're watching." Marcus studied the map. The limestone mine was located on property that had changed hands several times since his father first established the cache in 1971. Current owner was a holding company that traced back to a trust his father had created. "My father bought the land," Marcus said, surprised. "He must have used money from the network to secure the location permanently." "Smart," Jake said. "No one could access it without triggering legal attention. Unless they didn't care about legal attention." "You think Richter knows about this location?" "I think he knows about all of them. He's been searching for 70 years. He probably has better maps than we do." They arrived at the mine entrance at 9 in the morning. The property was isolated, surrounded by overgrown fields and abandoned equipment from the quarrying operation that had ceased decades ago. The mine entrance itself was hidden behind deteriorated fencing that looked like random decay but had actually been arranged to conceal access. Marcus recognized his father's handiwork. "Danny, establish overwatch. Miguel, check for surveillance. Jake, you're with me." They moved with the precision of men who had conducted hundreds of similar operations. No wasted motion, no unnecessary communication, every action calculated for maximum effect. Miguel returned in 3 minutes. "No active surveillance, but there's evidence someone was here recently. Fresh tire tracks, cigarette butts that aren't weathered." "How recent?" "Within the last 48 hours. Marcus felt tension coil in his chest. Richter's people had already found this location. They were scouting, planning, preparing. The race was closer than he had realized. "We go in fast, document everything, extract what we can carry, get out before they come back." The mine entrance was narrow, requiring single-file passage through a corridor carved from limestone decades ago. Their flashlights cut through darkness that felt thick and ancient. 50 yards in the corridor opened into a chamber that took Marcus's breath away. Climate control systems hummed quietly, powered by generators his father had somehow maintained for over 40 years. The air was cool and dry, perfect for preserving delicate materials. Wooden crates lined the walls, each labeled with coded numbers corresponding to the inventory lists. Family names marked every container: Rosenberg, Goldberg, Weissman, Kovacs. "This is a museum," Jake whispered. "Your father built a museum underground." Marcus walked through the chamber slowly, his flashlight playing across row after row of preserved heritage. Each crate represented a family destroyed. Each label marked someone's grandmother or grandfather or child. His father had spent 30 years protecting other people's memories. The evidence section was separate, housed in waterproof containers with additional security measures. Marcus opened the first container and found photographs that made his stomach turn. Heinrich Richter personally supervising the loading of stolen artwork onto trains. Heinrich Richter signing documents that authorized the seizure of Jewish property. Heinrich Richter standing beside crates marked with symbols that matched the ones on containers in this very chamber. "This isn't just evidence of theft," Marcus said quietly. "This is evidence that ties specific items to specific crimes. We could prove exactly what Richter stole from whom and what happened to it, which would destroy Carl Richter's claims to any of this property. Which is why he wants it buried." They worked for 2 hours photographing everything, documenting item descriptions, recording provenance information. Miguel uploaded copies to encrypted cloud storage that would survive even if the physical materials were destroyed. They were loading the most critical evidence containers into the truck when Danny's voice crackled through their earpieces. "We have company. 3 vehicles approaching from the north. Military formation." Marcus felt adrenaline spike through his system. "How long?" 4 minutes, maybe 5. "Can we extract?" "Negative. They'll see us before we clear the property." Jake looked at Marcus with the calm expression of a man who had faced impossible situations before. "Options?" Marcus thought quickly. The mine had multiple chambers, multiple passages. His father had chosen this location for a reason. "There's another exit. Has to be. My father would never have created a hiding place with only one way out." They moved deeper into the mine, carrying what evidence they could and leaving the rest. Marcus scanned the walls, looking for the signs his father would have left. He found them carved into the limestone at eye level. Small marks that looked like random scratches but formed a pattern when viewed correctly. "This way." The secondary passage was narrower than the main entrance, requiring them to move almost sideways in places, but it led steadily upward toward the surface. They emerged behind a pile of rusted mining equipment hidden from view of the main entrance. Through gaps in the machinery, Marcus watched 3 black SUVs parked near the mine entrance. 8 men emerged, all carrying weapons, all moving with military precision. And leading them, dressed in an expensive suit that looked absurd in the Ohio countryside, was Carl Richter. "He came personally," Jake murmured. "That's either arrogance or desperation." "Maybe both." They watched Richter's team enter the mine, watched them disappear into the darkness that had protected his father's legacy for 40 years. "They're going to find everything we didn't take," Miguel said. "Let them. We have copies of all the documentation, and we have the evidence that matters most." Marcus touched the container strapped to his back. "Richter can have the treasure. We have the proof of how it was stolen." They made their way back to their vehicle, using routes that kept them hidden from observation. But Marcus knew that the confrontation was not over. It was just beginning. His phone buzzed as they drove north toward Ridgemont. "Sophia. Dad, something happened. Someone broke into Pete Morrison's garage while I was talking to him. They took files. Old files about the network." Marcus's hands tightened on the phone. "Are you hurt?" "No, we weren't there when it happened. But Pete says those files had information about other cache locations, backup sites that weren't on Grandpa's main map." Richter was moving faster than Marcus had anticipated, attacking on multiple fronts, gathering information from every source. "Where are you now?" "At Pete's house. He says we should stay here until you get back. He has security." "What kind of security?" A new voice came on the line, older, gravel rough, the voice of a man who had kept secrets for decades. "Marcus, Pete Morrison, your father and I worked together for 30 years. I've been waiting for this call since the day he died." "Mr. Morrison?" "Pete, and you need to know that Richter isn't just after the items. He's after everyone who knows about them. Everyone who could testify about what his grandfather did." "How many people know about him alive? Maybe a dozen? Scattered across the country. But some of us stayed close. Some of us have been protecting what your father left behind." protecting how... Pete Morrison's laugh was dry and humorless. Your father wasn't the only one who kept records, son. He wasn't the only one who prepared for this day. You've got the main cache and the evidence. But there are other things. Things that could help you finish this mission. Things that could destroy Richter completely. What things? Come to my house, bring your friends, and be careful. Richter has more resources than you realize, and he's been planning this operation for longer than you've been alive. The call ended. Marcus looked at Jake. Change of plans. We're going to Pete Morrison's house. Who is he? According to my father's letter, he's one of the people who helped protect all of this. According to him, he has information that could change everything. And according to you, Marcus thought about his father, about the network of railroad men who had devoted their lives to protecting stolen heritage, about the mission that had been passed down through generations. According to me, he's family, the kind of family that chose each other instead of being born into it. They drove toward Ridgemont as the sun began to set. Behind them, Carl Richter was discovering what Marcus had taken and what he had left. Ahead of them, answers waited in an old mechanic's house, and somewhere in between, the war for 70 years of secrets was about to explode. Pete Morrison's house was small and unassuming, set back from the road behind a chain-link fence that looked purely decorative. It was not. Marcus recognized the signs immediately. Pressure sensors in the driveway. Motion detectors disguised as garden ornaments. A sightline from the main window that covered every approach. Pete Morrison had spent decades preparing for exactly this kind of trouble. Sophia met them at the door, her face pale but determined. He's in the basement. Says there's something we all need to see. The basement was nothing like Marcus expected. Maps covered every wall. Photographs, newspaper clippings dating back to the 1940s. A timeline of the railroad network's operations spanning 5 decades. And at the center of it all, a corkboard covered with photographs of Carl Richter and his associates. Pete Morrison stood beside a workbench covered with documents. Your father was the heart of the network, Pete said without preamble, but he wasn't alone. There were 12 of us at the peak, railroad men who decided that following orders wasn't enough. That justice mattered more than procedure. My father's letter mentioned the network, but he didn't give details. Because the details were dangerous, still are. Pete picked up a faded photograph showing a group of men standing beside a locomotive. This was taken in 1947. 2 years after the war ended. Your father is there on the left. My father is next to him. The others are scattered now, dead or disappeared. What happened to them? Richter's family happened. Not Carl, his father and grandfather. They spent decades trying to find what we hid. Some of our men died in accidents that weren't accidents. Others received threats and went underground. A few talked and regretted it. Jake stepped forward. You're saying the Richter family has been actively eliminating witnesses for 70 years. I'm saying they've been protecting their secrets with whatever means necessary, and Carl is the most determined of all of them, the most ruthless. Marcus looked at the corkboard. Photographs of Carl Richter at various ages, business associates, known locations, travel patterns. You've been tracking him for 20 years, since he took over the family's search operation from his father. Pete's expression hardened. He's not just a businessman protecting assets, Marcus. He's a true believer. Convinced that his grandfather was a hero who had his property stolen by American invaders. Convinced that everything the Nazis took was rightfully acquired. That's insane. That's ideology, and it's more dangerous than greed. A greedy man can be bought off. A true believer will die before surrendering. Sophia had been studying the maps on the wall. Pete, these locations don't match the map we found in the locomotive. Because these are the backup sites. Locations your grandfather established in the 1960s and 70s when he realized that the main caches might eventually be compromised. Pete walked to a map of Ohio and pointed to 3 marks. These 3 sites have never been accessed, never documented except in records I've kept personally. Richter doesn't know they exist. What's in them? The most personal items. The ones your grandfather couldn't bear to leave in locations that might be discovered. Family photographs, letters, jewelry with inscriptions, things that have no monetary value but infinite meaning to the families they belong to. Marcus thought about Ruth Goldberg, 92 years old, searching for her grandmother's menorah for 74 years. Can you take us to them? I can, but there's something you need to understand first. Pete turned to face Marcus directly. Richter discovered the main cache today. He's going to find most of what your father hid, the artwork, the valuable items, the things that can be sold. We took the evidence, the documentation of his grandfather's crimes. Which means he's going to come after you personally, not just to recover the evidence, to eliminate the threat you represent. I can handle Richter. Can you? Because he's not going to attack you directly, he's going to attack everything and everyone you care about. Your daughter, your friends, anyone who might help you. Pete's voice dropped. He's already started? What do you mean? Pete handed Marcus a piece of paper, a printed email intercepted by Danny's surveillance systems. He's contacted the bank that holds your mortgage, made an offer to purchase your debt at a premium. If they accept, he'll own your house within a week. He can evict you, destroy your belongings, make you homeless while the legal system takes months to sort it out. Marcus read the email twice. Richter was not just fighting for treasure, he was fighting to destroy. There has to be a way to stop him. There is. Pete walked to a safe hidden behind a false panel in the wall. Old habits. Your father left something for exactly this situation, something that Carl Richter fears more than losing his fortune. The safe contained a single envelope. Pete handed it to Marcus. Open it. Inside was a document written in German with an official translation attached, dated 1944, signed by Heinrich Richter himself. A confession. Not to war crimes exactly, but to the systematic cataloging of acquired assets with detailed records of their origins, families named, addresses listed, dates of acquisition corresponding to known deportations. Heinrich Richter had kept meticulous records of his theft, and someone had saved a copy. Where did this come from? From a secretary who worked in Richter's office, a German woman who saw what was happening and couldn't stop it. She copied documents when she could, smuggled them out in her clothing, got them to American intelligence officers after the war. Why wasn't this used at Nuremberg? Because Heinrich Richter was dead by then, and there were bigger fish to prosecute. Pete's voice was bitter. But this document proves that the Richter family knew exactly what they were doing, that every item they've claimed as family property was systematically stolen from people who were murdered for having it. Marcus looked at the document, then at Jake, then at his daughter. If we release this publicly, Carl Richter's claims collapse. Every lawsuit he's filed, every legal threat he's made, all of it becomes worthless. More than that, Pete said. If this document reaches the right authorities, it triggers investigations into how the Richter family has maintained their fortune for 70 years. It doesn't just embarrass them, it destroys them. Sophia stepped forward. Then why haven't you released it already? Because your grandfather believed that the families deserved to receive their property first. That justice wasn't just about punishing the guilty, it was about restoring what was lost. Pete looked at Marcus. He wanted the returns to happen before the legal battles started. He wanted the families to have their heritage back before anyone could tie it up in courts for decades. But now Richter has the main cash, which is why the timeline has to change, which is why you need to decide what matters more, returning items to families who've waited 70 years or destroying the man who's trying to steal them. Marcus stood in silence for a long moment. His father had spent 30 years returning what he could while protecting what he couldn't. His father had believed in justice over revenge, but his father had never had Carl Richter threaten his granddaughter. We do both, Marcus said finally. We secure the backup caches, we contact the families who can receive items immediately, and we prepare the evidence for release if Richter doesn't back down. He won't back down, I told you, he's a true believer. Then he'll face the consequences of his beliefs. Marcus turned to Jake. Can your contacts accelerate authentication? Get items verified for immediate return. I know people, museum curators, independent experts. If the documentation is solid, we can have items authenticated within days instead of months. Do it. Start with the families Pete can identify, the ones who've been searching longest. And Richter. Marcus looked at the confession document in his hands. 70 years of secrets, 70 years of crimes, all contained in a few pages of German typescript. We let him make the next move, but when he does, we'll be ready. His phone buzzed. Unknown number, he answered. Mr. Cole. Carl Richter's voice was colder than before, harder. I see you've been to the mine. I see you've taken things that don't belong to you. They never belonged to you, Richter. They belong to families your grandfather helped murder. History is written by the victors, Mr. Cole, and I intend to win. Then why are you calling? To give you one final opportunity. Return what you've taken. All documentation, all evidence, everything connected to my family's property. Do this within 24 hours, and I'll forget that you and your daughter exist. And if I refuse, then I'll demonstrate exactly how thorough my organization can be when removing obstacles." Richter's voice dropped to something barely above a whisper. "Your daughter walks home from school on Maple Street. She stops at the coffee shop on the corner at 3:15 every afternoon. She has a friend named Jenny who drives a blue Honda with a dent in the rear bumper. Should I continue?" Marcus felt rage building in his chest like pressure in a bomb. "Richter, listen to me carefully. I have evidence that will destroy your family. Documents signed by your grandfather detailing every crime he committed. If anything happens to me or my daughter or anyone I care about, those documents go public within hours. Every newspaper, every government agency, every Holocaust organization in the world." Silence on the other end. "You're bluffing." "Try me." The call ended. Marcus looked at the team assembled around him. Former SEALs, a 71-year-old mechanic, his 16-year-old daughter. "He's not going to stop," Sophia said quietly. "No, he's not." So what do we do? Marcus thought about his father, about the mission that had been passed down through generations, about the 47 families still waiting for justice. We finish what your grandfather started. We return what was stolen. We protect what remains. And we make sure that Carl Richter never hurts anyone again. How? Marcus looked at Jake, at Danny, at Miguel. By doing what we've always done. By being better, faster, smarter. By fighting not for ourselves, but for people who can't fight for themselves. He held up the confession document. This is our weapon, and we're going to use it to end this war. The first backup cache was located 47 miles northeast of Ridgemont, hidden beneath the foundation of an abandoned church that had burned down in 1968. Pete Morrison drove the lead vehicle navigating back roads that did not appear on any commercial GPS system. Marcus sat in the passenger seat studying the documentation his father had left behind. Each cache had its own security protocols, its own access requirements, its own inventory of items that families had been searching for since before Marcus was born. Your father chose this location specifically, Pete said as they drove through darkness. The church burned before I was born, but my father told me the story. The congregation was mostly immigrant families, Jewish refugees who had escaped Europe after the war. When they built the church, they created a basement vault for exactly this purpose. They knew about the network. They were part of the network. Some of them had lost everything during the Holocaust. Some of them had family members who were still searching for items that had been stolen. They understood what your father was trying to do because they understood what had been lost. Marcus thought about his father attending church every Sunday, about the quiet conversations he would have with elderly parishioners that always seemed to last longer than casual greetings required. His father had been running a secret operation for 30 years, and Marcus had never suspected. "How did you know my father?" he asked. "I didn't at first. My father worked with him during the war. I was just a kid watching them unload crates in the middle of the night and being told to forget what I saw." Pete's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "But when my father died, he passed the responsibility to me. Told me that someday William Cole's son would come asking questions. Told me to be ready. You've been waiting 21 years. Waiting and watching. Keeping track of what Richter was doing. Making sure the backup sites stayed secure." Pete glanced at Marcus. "Your father trusted you to figure this out on your own. He believed that if you were meant to continue the mission, you would find your way to it without being led. And if I hadn't bought the locomotive, then somebody else would have. Eventually, the truth has a way of surfacing when it's ready." They arrived at the church site at 2 a.m. The foundation was all that remained, overgrown with decades of vegetation and forgotten by everyone except those who knew what lay beneath. Jake and his team established a perimeter while Pete led Marcus to an entrance hidden beneath a collapsed section of stone wall. "The vault is still intact," Pete said, moving debris aside to reveal a metal door set into concrete. "Your father inspected it every 5 years until he died. I've continued that schedule." The door opened with a key Pete produced from a chain around his neck. Inside the vault was smaller than the main cache, but no less significant. Wooden boxes lined the walls, each marked with family names and dates. Marcus opened the first box. Photographs. Dozens of them. Black and white images of families posed formally for portraits that would be their last. Children in their best clothes. Parents with expressions that mixed hope and fear. Grandparents whose eyes seemed to stare directly through time. These are the personal items, Pete said quietly. The things that can't be sold but can't be replaced. Your father couldn't bear to leave them in locations that might be compromised. He wanted them protected above everything else. Marcus lifted a small velvet bag and opened it. Inside was a wedding ring, simple gold with an inscription in Hebrew. Rachel Rosenberg, Pete said, reading from a tag attached to the bag. Her grandmother's ring, worn at 4 generations of weddings before the war. Rachel has been searching for this ring for 74 years. She's still alive. 92 years old. Lives in Brooklyn. I have her contact information at my house. Marcus closed his hand around the ring. Such a small thing. Such an ordinary object. But to Rachel Rosenberg, it was everything that remained of a family destroyed by hatred. We start with her, Marcus said. We return this ring first. They worked for 3 hours, cataloging and photographing every item in the vault. By dawn, they had documented 43 family treasures, each one representing a story of loss and a possibility of restoration. But as they prepared to leave, Danny's voice crackled through the communication system. We have a problem. Richter's team is moving. 6 vehicles heading toward Ridgemont at high speed. Marcus felt ice form in his stomach. Sophia? He ran for the vehicle. Jake caught up with him before he reached the door. Marcus, wait. Think tactically. My daughter is in danger. And rushing in without a plan is exactly what Richter wants you to do. Jake gripped his friend's shoulder. Danny, where exactly are they heading? Satellite tracking shows them converging on Pete Morrison's house. They know where Sophia is staying. How long until they arrive? 17 minutes, maybe less. Marcus's mind raced through options. 17 minutes. Not enough time to intercept. Not enough time to extract Sophia through normal channels. But there were other options. Danny, can you contact Sophia directly? Already trying. She's not answering her phone. Pete, does your house have a safe room? Basement, reinforced concrete. Your father helped me build it 30 years ago. Danny, patch into Pete's home system. Trigger the lockdown protocol. I don't have the codes. Pete stepped forward. I do. He pulled out his phone and entered a sequence of numbers. Somewhere in Ridgemont, steel doors began sliding into place. Sophia's in the basement now, Danny reported. The house is locked down. They can't get to her without heavy equipment or explosives. Marcus exhaled slowly. His daughter was safe. For now, but Richter had escalated, and the game had changed. Pete, how long will that lockdown hold? Against what Richter's bringing, maybe an hour, 2 if they're cautious. Then we have 2 hours to end this. Jake's expression sharpened. End it how, Pete? Marcus pulled out the confession document his father had saved for 70 years. Heinrich Richter's own words, his own admission of systematic theft. We release this, now, to everyone. That's the nuclear option. Once it's out, there's no taking it back. Richter just sent a team to attack my daughter. We're past diplomacy. Marcus turned to Miguel. Can you upload this to every news organization, Holocaust recovery group, and law enforcement agency simultaneously? Give me 10 minutes. Do it. While Miguel worked, Marcus made a phone call he had been avoiding since this began. Doctor. Rebecca Sterling answered on the second ring. Mr. Cole, I was wondering when you would contact me. Dr. Sterling, I need your help. We've recovered documentation proving that the Richter family systematically stole Holocaust assets and has been claiming legitimate ownership for 70 years. I'm releasing this information publicly within the hour, but I need expert validation to ensure it's taken seriously. What kind of documentation? Heinrich Richter's personal records, signed by him, detailing every item stolen from whom and when. We also have evidence of ongoing efforts by his grandson to suppress this information through intimidation and violence. Silence on the other end. Then Dr. Sterling's voice returned, changed. Professional, excited. Send me everything you have. I'll authenticate what I can within the hour and prepare statements for the media and relevant authorities. This is exactly what the recovery community has been waiting for. There's more. We've located backup caches containing personal items that families have been searching for since 1945. Photographs, jewelry, religious artifacts. Things with no monetary value but infinite meaning. Can you get those items to the families quickly? That's the plan, but Richter is actively trying to stop us. He has a team converging on my daughter's location right now. I'll contact federal authorities immediately. The FBI has an art crime team that's been investigating Richter for years. If you can provide evidence of current criminal activity, I can provide evidence of attempted kidnapping and intimidation, multiple witnesses, documented communications. That's enough. Send me the location. I'll have agents there within 30 minutes. Marcus ended the call as Miguel completed the upload. Done. The documents are going to every major news outlet, every Holocaust recovery organization, and every relevant law enforcement agency in the United States and Europe. Richter's world is about to collapse. Danny's voice cut through the moment. The team heading toward Pete's house just stopped. They're receiving communications. Something's changed. Marcus watched the satellite feed on Danny's laptop. The 6 vehicles had pulled off the road and were clustered together. Men were emerging, phones pressed to their ears. Frantic gestures. Heated arguments. They just got the news, Jake said. Someone in Richter's organization saw the documents go live. What are they doing now, Chul? Pulling back. All 6 vehicles are reversing course, heading back toward the motel. Marcus felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. The immediate threat to Sophia had passed. But the war was far from over. Danny, what's Richter's location? Still at the motel, but there's been a lot of activity in the past few minutes. Multiple phone calls. Several of his team members have left in separate vehicles. He's scattering his forces, preparing for damage control. Jake nodded. The documents going public changes his calculus. He can't just eliminate witnesses anymore. Too much attention, too many eyes watching. But he can still try to discredit us, claim the documents are forgeries, tie everything up in legal challenges for years. Pete Morrison had been listening quietly. Now he stepped forward. There's something else, something that can end this definitively. What? The railroad network didn't just hide assets. We documented our operations, every return we made, every family we helped, testimonials from survivors who received their belongings back. Pete's eyes held Marcus's. I have recordings. Video recordings made in the 1980s and 90s. Holocaust survivors describing what was returned to them, thanking your father and the others by name. Why didn't you mention this before? Because those recordings also identify network members who are still alive. People who could be targeted if Richter knew who they were. Pete paused. But if the documents are already public, if Richter is already exposed, then the recordings become weapons instead of vulnerabilities. They prove that we've been doing this work for decades. They prove that the items we're protecting belong to the families we say they belong to. Where are these recordings? Safe deposit box. Bank in Columbus. I can have them within 2 hours. Marcus thought quickly. The documents were public. The FBI was responding. Richter was scrambling, but the war was not won until the families received their heritage. Split up. Jake, you go with Pete to Columbus. Get those recordings and bring them to Dr. Sterling. Miguel, Danny, you're with me. We're going to extract Sophia and begin the return process. And Richter is going to face everything his grandfather did and everything he's done to cover it up. But that's not our job anymore. That's Justice's job. They moved. Pete Morrison's house was quiet when Marcus arrived. The lockdown had ended 20 minutes earlier when Danny confirmed that all threats had withdrawn, but the steel doors and reinforced windows served as reminders of how close they had come to disaster. Sophia met him at the door. Dad? Her voice shook. When the alarm went off, I thought, I know. He pulled her into an embrace. But you're safe. The lockdown worked. Everything worked. What happened? Why did they come? Richter made his move, and we made ours. Marcus showed her his phone where news alerts were already flooding in. The documents are public. The whole world knows what his grandfather did and what Carl has been trying to hide. Sophia read the headlines with widening eyes. Nazi officer's grandson exposed in Holocaust asset cover-up. FBI investigates Richter family for decades of fraud. Secret railroad network protected Holocaust treasures for 70 years. Dad, this is everywhere. Every major network, international coverage. That's the point. Richter can't suppress this anymore. Can't intimidate witnesses. Can't make people disappear. The truth is out. What happens now? Marcus thought about Ruth Goldberg and her grandmother's ring, about the 43 families whose treasures they had recovered from the church vault, about the mission his father had spent 30 years protecting. Now we finish what your grandfather started. We return what was stolen. We give families back their heritage. How long will that take? As long as it takes, but we start today, right now. They spent the next 6 hours making phone calls. Dr. Sterling coordinated with her network of experts authenticating items and locating family members. Pete Morrison returned from Columbus with the video recordings which were immediately uploaded to support the documentary evidence. Jake worked with federal authorities providing testimony about Richter's attempted assault on Sophia, but it was Sophia who made the call that mattered most. Hello, is this Ruth Goldberg? Marcus watched his daughter hold the phone with trembling hands. My name is Sophia Cole. My grandfather was William Cole. He worked on the railroad in Ohio, and I'm calling because we found something that belongs to your family. Silence on the other end. Then a voice, ancient and fragile, trembling with emotion. William Cole. I remember that name. My mother mentioned it once. Said someone was trying to help us. Said someone had promised to find what was lost. Mrs. Goldberg, we found your grandmother's ring. The gold wedding band with the Hebrew inscription. It's been protected for 70 years, and we want to return it to you. The sound that came through the phone was not quite a cry and not quite a laugh. It was something older. Something that carried 74 years of searching and hoping and refusing to give up. My grandmother's ring? She wore it when she married my grandfather in 1902. She wore it when they fled Poland. She wore it when... Ruth's voice broke. She was wearing it when they took her. I always wondered what happened to it. Your grandmother's ring was protected by men who believed that some things are too important to lose. My grandfather was one of those men. He spent his whole life making sure that families like yours could someday get back what was taken. Is he still alive? Your grandfather, I would like to thank him. Sophia looked at Marcus. Her eyes were wet. No, Mrs. Goldberg. He passed away 21 years ago, but he left instructions. He wanted his family to finish what he started. That's why I'm calling you today. Ruth Goldberg was crying openly now. 74 years of grief releasing in waves that carried across phone lines and generations. 74 years. I searched for 74 years. My mother searched before she died. My grandmother never stopped hoping. And now you're telling me. We're telling you that justice takes time. Sometimes it takes more time than one person's life, but it doesn't have to die with them. It can be passed on. It can be completed. When can I see it, the ring? When can I hold it? Sophia looked at Marcus again. He nodded. Mrs. Goldberg, if you're willing, we would like to bring it to you personally, my father and I. We want to place it in your hands ourselves. Come, please come. I have waited 74 years. I can wait a few more days. The call ended. Sophia sat motionless, a tear streaming down her face. Dad, we just gave someone back 74 years of hope. Marcus knelt beside his daughter and pulled her close. That's what your grandfather spent his life doing. That's what we're going to keep doing. One family at a time, one treasure at a time, until everyone who's been searching finds what they lost. How many families? 47 that we know of, probably more we haven't discovered yet. And Richter, what happens to him? Marcus thought about the news reports flooding every channel, about the FBI investigation, about the evidence that would be examined and authenticated and used to hold the Richter family accountable. Richter is going to face consequences he never imagined, but that's not our concern anymore. Our concern is the families, the heritage, the mission. His phone rang. Jake. Marcus, you need to see this. Turn on any news channel. Marcus found the remote and powered on the television. Carl Richter's face filled the screen. He was being led from the Ridgemont Motor Lodge in handcuffs, surrounded by FBI agents. His expensive suit was rumpled. His composed expression had shattered into something desperate and afraid. The news anchor's voice provided context. Carl Richter, grandson of SS Oberfuhrer Heinrich Richter, was arrested this afternoon on charges of conspiracy to commit fraud, intimidation of witnesses, and attempted obstruction of justice. Federal authorities say this arrest is the result of documents released earlier today that expose 70 years of systematic efforts by the Richter family to claim ownership of Holocaust assets stolen by the Nazi regime. Marcus watched Richter being placed in a federal vehicle, watched the man who had threatened his daughter disappear into custody. It's over, Sophia whispered. Not over, just beginning. Marcus turned off the television. The arrest is just the start. The real work is returning everything that was protected. That's going to take months, maybe years, but it's work worth doing. His phone buzzed again. A text from Dr. Sterling. Authentication complete on 43 items from the church vault. Families notified. Returns can begin immediately. Below that, another text. Ruth Goldberg's granddaughter called. The family wants to fly you and Sophia to Brooklyn. They want to make the return a celebration. They want to honor your grandfather's memory. Marcus showed the message to Sophia. What do you think? Sophia wiped her eyes and smiled, the first genuine smile he had seen from her since Elena died. I think Grandpa would want us to go. I think Mom would want us to go. I think we've spent enough time grieving the past. It's time to celebrate the future. Then we go. They flew to Brooklyn 3 days later. Ruth Goldberg's apartment was small, filled with photographs of family members spanning 4 generations. 3 of her children were present, 7 grandchildren, 11 great-grandchildren, a family that had rebuilt itself from the ashes of genocide and refused to be erased. Ruth sat in her favorite chair, surrounded by descendants who existed because she had survived. Marcus approached her with the velvet bag containing her grandmother's ring. Mrs. Goldberg, my grandfather William Cole made a promise 80 years ago. He promised that what was stolen would be returned, that families would be reunited with their heritage, that justice would eventually come. He placed the bag in her trembling hands. He spent his whole life keeping that promise, and he passed that responsibility to his children and grandchildren. Today, my daughter and I are here to fulfill that promise. Ruth opened the bag. The ring gleamed in the afternoon light, simple gold, with an inscription that had survived pogroms and persecution and the worst genocide in human history. Ruth slid the ring onto her finger, and for the first time in 74 years, she felt her grandmother's hand holding hers. She protected me, Ruth whispered. My grandmother. When they came to take us, she hid me under the floorboards. She said, "Live, Rachel, live and remember." I lived, I remembered, and now I hold her ring again. The apartment filled with tears and laughter, children hugging grandparents, stories being shared across generations, a family healing from wounds that had festered for nearly a century. Sophia stood beside Marcus, watching the celebration. This is what Grandpa spent his life protecting, she said softly. Not the ring, not the gold. This, the possibility of healing, the chance for families to feel whole again. Yes, and we're going to do this 46 more times. At least, maybe more as we discover other families who've been searching. Good, Sophia took her father's hand. Because this is the first time since Mom died that I feel like we have a purpose, like there's a reason to keep going. Marcus squeezed his daughter's hand. Your mother would be proud of you. She'd be proud of you too, Dad. You didn't give up, even when everyone thought you were crazy, even when I thought you were crazy. I almost did give up, many times. But you didn't, and now look what's happening. Ruth Goldberg rose from her chair and walked slowly toward Marcus. Her family parted to let her pass. Mr. Cole, you have given me back my grandmother's blessing. You have given my family back our history. I am 92 years old. I thought I would die without ever feeling her presence again. She took his hands in hers. But God had other plans. He sent your grandfather to protect what was stolen. He sent you to return it, and he sent your daughter to remind us all that some promises are worth keeping across generations. My father believed that some things are more important than money or recognition. Your father was right, and you are proving him right every day. Ruth looked at Sophia. Young lady, you carry a sacred responsibility. Never forget what your family has done. Never forget what was lost, and never stop working to restore what remains. Sophia nodded, tears streaming down her face. I won't, Mrs. Goldberg, I promise. Ruth smiled. Another promise, another link in the chain that connects us all. She looked around at her family, at the ring on her finger, at the legacy of survival and hope that filled her small apartment. This is what the Nazis tried to destroy, this gathering, this love, this connection across time. They failed, because there will always be people like your grandfather. People like you. People who understand that some treasures cannot be measured in gold or silver. The celebration continued late into the evening. Stories were shared. Photographs were examined. Names were spoken aloud that had not been uttered in decades. And in the midst of it all, Marcus Cole understood what his father had spent his entire life protecting. Not artifacts, not valuables. Memory itself. The memory of who people were before hatred tried to erase them. The memory that connected generations across time and tragedy. The memory that proved no matter how dark the world became, light would eventually find its way back. His phone buzzed as they prepared to leave. Dr. Sterling. Mr. Cole, the video recordings Pete Morrison provided have been authenticated and are being incorporated into the federal case against Carl Richter. But there's something else. The recordings mention additional cache locations that weren't on any of the maps we have. Locations that might contain items for families we haven't identified yet. Marcus looked at Ruth Goldberg's family, still celebrating, still healing. Send me the information. We'll investigate. There's more. Several Holocaust survivor organizations have contacted me. They want to establish a formal partnership with your family. They want to use your grandfather's methods as a model for future recovery efforts. I'll think about it. And Mr. Cole, what you and your daughter did today, it matters, more than you know. Ruth Goldberg's return has already inspired 6 other families to renew their searches. Hope is contagious. That's what my father believed. Your father was a wise man, and he raised a son who understood his wisdom. Marcus ended the call. Sophia stood beside him watching Ruth Goldberg's great-grandchildren playing in the corner of the apartment. What's next? She asked. More returns, more families, more healing. How long? As long as it takes. Sophia nodded. Good, because I don't want this to end. I want to spend my whole life doing what we did today. Marcus put his arm around his daughter. Then that's exactly what we'll do. Outside Ruth Goldberg's apartment window, the sun set over Brooklyn. Orange and gold light painted the sky the same colors that had illuminated sunsets over this city for centuries. Generations had lived and died under that light. Families had been destroyed and rebuilt. Hope had flickered and burned bright again. And in a small apartment filled with love and memory, a 92-year-old woman held her grandmother's ring and remembered what it meant to be whole. The mission was not complete. But for the first time since it began, Marcus Cole could see how it would end. With justice. With restoration. With the healing of wounds that had waited 70 years to close. His father had started this work. His daughter would continue it. And the chain of promises would remain unbroken. 3 weeks after Ruth Goldberg received her grandmother's ring, Marcus stood in a federal courtroom watching Carl Richter's empire collapse. The prosecution had presented evidence for 6 hours. Documents, photographs, video testimonials from Holocaust survivors who had received items through the railroad network, bank records showing how the Richter family had profited from stolen assets for 7 decades. Richter sat at the defense table, his expensive suit now wrinkled, his arrogant posture replaced by something that looked like defeat. His attorneys had filed motion after motion, but each had been denied. The evidence was overwhelming. The public attention was crushing. The man who had threatened Sophia Cole was watching his entire world burn. Marcus felt no satisfaction, only relief that it was ending. Mr. Cole, a voice behind him, Agent Sarah Martinez from the FBI art crime team. The judge is ready to announce the verdict on the preliminary charges. You should be inside. I've seen enough. This is because of you, your family, what your father protected for 30 years. You should witness the result. Marcus thought about his father, about the nights William Cole must have spent worrying that the evidence would never be used, that the families would never receive justice, that the mission would die with him. All right. He entered the courtroom as the judge took her seat. In the matter of the United States versus Karl Heinrich Richter on charges of conspiracy to commit fraud, witness intimidation, and obstruction of justice, this court finds the defendant guilty on all counts. The courtroom erupted. Reporters shouting questions. Richter's remaining supporters protesting. Family members of Holocaust victims crying with relief. Marcus watched Richter's face as the verdict was announced. The German's expression shifted through shock, then rage, then something that might have been acceptance. 70 years of secrets, 70 years of lies, all exposed in a single moment. Sentencing will take place in 6 weeks, the judge continued. The defendant is remanded to federal custody pending that hearing. This court is adjourned. Marshals approached Richter to escort him away. As he passed Marcus's row, he stopped. You think you've won? Richter said quietly. But you've only delayed the inevitable. My family will recover. We always do. Your family profited from murder for 3 generations. That ends now. Nothing ends, Cole. Everything just transforms into something else. The marshals pulled Richter forward. He did not resist, but his eyes held Marcus's until the courtroom doors closed between them. Sophia was waiting outside the courthouse. She had watched the verdict announcement on her phone, surrounded by reporters who had learned to recognize her as one of the key figures in the story. He's going to prison, she said as Marcus approached. Actually going to prison. For a long time. The sentencing guidelines suggest 15 to 20 years. Is it enough? For everything his family did, Marcus thought about Heinrich Richter standing beside Engine 552 supervising the loading of stolen treasures, about the families who had lost everything, about the survivors who had spent lifetimes searching for what was taken. No, it's not enough, but it's more than we had 3 weeks ago. Dr. Sterling joined them, her silver hair catching the afternoon light. The verdict is just the beginning. Federal prosecutors are now investigating the Richter family's business holdings across 3 continents. They're tracing how stolen assets were laundered through legitimate companies for decades. How much are we talking about? Preliminary estimates suggest over $200 million in assets that can be directly linked to Holocaust theft. Courts will have to determine how that money gets redistributed to survivor families. Sophia's eyes widened. 200 million. At minimum, the Richter empire was built on stolen property. Every business, every investment, every generation of wealth traces back to what Heinrich Richter took from murdered families. Marcus absorbed this information. His father had spent 30 years protecting evidence that would ultimately expose one of the largest Holocaust theft operations ever documented. What happens to the items Richter's team recovered from the main cache? Federal authorities seized everything when they arrested him. The items are now in secure storage pending authentication and returned to rightful owners. Dr. Sterling smiled. Your father's documentation made that process remarkably straightforward. Every item can be traced to a specific family. Every piece has provenance records that would satisfy any court. How many families are we talking about? The main cache contained items belonging to 31 families. Combined with what you recovered from the backup sites, we're looking at 47 families who will receive returns over the next several months. 47 families, his father's number. The mission was reaching completion, but Marcus knew there was more work to be done. The video recordings mentioned additional cache locations, he said. Sites that weren't on any of the maps we found. I've been investigating those references. There appear to be 3 locations in states we haven't searched yet: Pennsylvania, New York, Massachusetts. The railroad network extended further than anyone realized. Who maintains those sites now? I don't know. Some of the network members mentioned in the recordings are deceased. Others are untraceable, but there may be people like Pete Morrison out there, people who've been waiting for someone to come asking questions. Sophia stepped forward. Then we find them. We find everyone who knows anything about what Grandpa built. We complete the entire mission, not just the parts we already know about. Marcus looked at his daughter. In 3 weeks, she had transformed from a grieving teenager into something stronger, something more focused, something that reminded him of Elena at her best. That could take months, maybe years? Good, because I've already decided what I want to do with my life. Sophia's voice carried certainty. I want to study Holocaust history. I want to learn everything about asset recovery and family restoration. I want to continue what Grandpa started and make sure it never stops. College applications are due in 3 months. I know. I've already started researching programs. Georgetown has one of the best Holocaust studies departments in the country. Dr. Sterling says she can write me a recommendation. Marcus felt something shift inside him. Pride, hope, the knowledge that his father's legacy would continue through another generation. Your mother would be proud of you. Mom would be proud of both of us. We finally stopped falling apart and started building something. Dr. Sterling interrupted gently. There's something else you should know. The publicity from this case has generated enormous interest in Holocaust asset recovery. Families who had given up searching are starting to look again. Museums are reviewing their collections for items with questionable provenance. Governments are reopening investigations that had been dormant for decades. Because of what we did, because of what your family protected, your father and his network preserved evidence that nobody else bothered to keep. They maintained documentation when governments destroyed records to avoid embarrassment. They believed in justice when everyone else had moved on. Marcus thought about his father's letter, about the mission passed from generation to generation, about the promise that justice would eventually come. Then we keep going. We find the remaining caches. We locate every family who's still searching. We finish what my father started. 2 days later, Marcus received a phone call that changed everything again. Mr. Cole, my name is Hannah Weissman. I understand you've been looking for families connected to the railroad network. Marcus straightened in his chair. Mrs. Weissman? Yes, your family's name appears in my father's records. I know. My grandfather was one of the original network members. He worked with William Cole from 1946 until his death in 1973. Your grandfather was part of the network. More than part of it. He helped establish the cache sites in Pennsylvania and Massachusetts. He maintained them for 27 years. Hannah's voice trembled slightly. When he died, he passed the responsibility to my mother. When she died, she passed it to me. Marcus felt his heart accelerate. You know where the additional caches are located. I know everything, Mr. Cole. Locations, inventories, families. My grandfather kept records just as meticulous as your father's. A pause. I've been waiting 30 years for someone to come asking. I was beginning to think no one ever would. We found references to your grandfather in video recordings made by other network members, but we couldn't locate anyone connected to him. My family has been careful. After what happened to some of the other network members in the 1970s and 80s, we learned to stay hidden. What happened to them? Richter's father. He was even more ruthless than Carl. He tracked down 3 network members and destroyed them, not physically, financially, professionally. He ruined their lives to intimidate the others into silence. Hannah's voice hardened. My grandfather watched friends lose everything because they tried to do the right thing. He decided that protecting the caches meant protecting our family's anonymity. But you're calling me now. Because Carl Richter is in prison, because the evidence is public, because for the first time in 50 years it's safe to finish what our grandfathers started. Marcus closed his eyes. Another piece of the puzzle falling into place. Another generation waiting to complete the mission. Mrs. Weissman, I would like to meet with you, to learn everything your grandfather documented, to combine our family's records and complete the work they began. I was hoping you would say that. I live in Philadelphia. Can you come here? I'll be there tomorrow. Bring your daughter. I've read about her in the news coverage. She reminds me of myself at that age, determined to carry on what our elders protected. She'll want to come. Good, because what I have to show you will take more than one generation to process. Marcus ended the call and found Sophia waiting in the doorway. I heard, she said, another network family. Her grandfather helped establish caches in 2 states. She has 30 years of additional documentation. How many more families could there be? How many people have been waiting for someone to come asking questions? I don't know, but we're going to find out. They flew to Philadelphia the next morning. Hannah Weissman was 73 years old with silver hair and sharp eyes. That reminded Marcus of Mrs. Patterson from Ridgemont. She lived in a brownstone that had been in her family for 4 generations, filled with photographs and memorabilia that documented a century of American Jewish life. My grandfather came to this country in 1938, Hannah said, leading them to a basement archive that rivaled Pete Morrison's. He saw what was coming in Europe and got his family out before the borders closed. But his parents, his siblings, his cousins, they weren't so lucky. They stayed. They died. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be effective. Hannah pulled out a leather-bound journal that looked identical to William Cole's. My grandfather survived, and he spent the rest of his life making sure that what happened to his family would not be forgotten, that what was stolen would eventually be returned. She opened the journal to reveal meticulous documentation of items, families, locations, and preservation protocols. There are 23 additional families in these records, 23 families whose treasures my grandfather protected after the railroad network divided responsibilities in 1952. Divided responsibilities, the original operation was too large for any one person to manage. Your grandfather took the Midwest, mine took the Northeast, others took different regions. Each of us maintained our own caches and records, but we were all working toward the same goal. Sophia leaned forward to examine the documentation. Mrs. Weissman, these records are incredibly detailed. Photographs, provenance documents, even correspondence with families who were searching. My grandfather believed in documentation the way some people believe in God. He said that paper outlasts memory, and memory outlasts everything else. Marcus compared Hannah's records to his father's documentation. The formats were similar. The methodology was identical. 2 men thousands of miles apart working in parallel to protect the same mission. Where are the cache sites? 2 locations, one outside Pittsburgh in an abandoned steel mill that my grandfather purchased through a shell company in 1954. One in western Massachusetts hidden beneath a farm that's been in our family since we came to America. Have you maintained them? Every 5 years, just like your father did. The items are preserved and protected. Hannah's voice softened. But I'm 73 years old, Mr. Cole. I don't have children. When I die, there will be no one left to protect what my grandfather saved. Then we need to complete the returns before that happens. That's why I called you. That's why I've been watching the news coverage and waiting for the right moment. Hannah took Marcus's hands in hers. William Cole and Samuel Weissman made a promise 80 years ago. They promised that what was stolen would be returned, that families would be reunited with their heritage, that justice would come no matter how long it took. My father kept that promise. So did mine. And now it's our turn to finish what they started. Hannah looked at Sophia. Both of us, and the next generation after that. They spent 3 days in Philadelphia reviewing Hannah's documentation and planning the recovery of the additional caches. The Pittsburgh site contained items belonging to 12 families. The Massachusetts site contained 11 more. Combined with the 47 families from the Midwest caches, they were now looking at 70 families who would receive returns. 70 years, 70 families. The symmetry felt intentional. On the 4th day, Dr. Sterling called with news that accelerated everything. Marcus, I've received word from the Holocaust Restitution Commission in Germany. They want to establish a formal partnership with the railroad network's remaining members. They're proposing to fund a permanent organization dedicated to completing the returns and documenting the network's history. What kind of organization? A foundation, properly funded, with legal authority to authenticate items and facilitate returns. They want to call it the Cole-Weissman Foundation in honor of the network's founders. Marcus looked at Hannah, who was listening to the conversation. They want to institutionalize what our fathers built. They want to make sure it never dies, Hannah replied, that even after we're gone, the work continues. There's more? Dr. Sterling continued. The German government is also proposing to formally apologize for the Richter family's crimes and to establish a restitution fund for families who can prove their assets were stolen. They're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. Sophia's eyes widened. Hundreds of millions. The Richter fortune was enormous, and now that its origins have been exposed, there's political pressure to make things right. The German government wants to demonstrate that they've changed, that they acknowledge the crimes of the past. Marcus processed this information. Financial restitution for families who had lost everything. A foundation to continue the recovery work. Official recognition of what the railroad network had accomplished. His father had spent 30 years working in secret. Now his legacy was being acknowledged by governments and institutions around the world. What do we need to do besides come to Washington, meet with the commission representatives, help design the foundation's structure and mission? Dr. Sterling paused. This is your father's moment, Marcus. Even though he's not here to see it, this is everything he worked for becoming real. They flew to Washington 3 days later. The meeting took place in a conference room at the Holocaust Memorial Museum, surrounded by photographs and artifacts documenting the genocide that had stolen so much from so many. Representatives from Germany, Israel, and the United States sat at a long table along with leaders from major Holocaust survivor organizations. Dr. Sterling made introductions and facilitated discussions. But it was Hannah Weissman who set the tone. My grandfather spent 27 years protecting items that belonged to families he never met. He did this because he believed that some promises are more important than personal convenience, more important than safety, more important than recognition. She placed her grandfather's journal on the table. William Cole believed the same thing, as did the other men who formed the railroad network 80 years ago. They worked in secret because secrecy was necessary. They sacrificed their own interests because the mission required sacrifice. They trusted that someday someone would come to complete what they started. Hannah looked at Marcus. That day has arrived. The evidence is public. The criminals are being prosecuted. The families are being identified. Now we need to ensure that this work continues beyond our lifetimes. That no matter what happens to us personally, the mission survives. The German representative spoke next. The Federal Republic acknowledges its responsibility for the crimes committed during the National Socialist period. We acknowledge that many families have been denied justice for far too long. And we acknowledge that private citizens like Mr. Cole's father and Mrs. Weissman's grandfather did more to preserve that justice than many governments. He slid a document across the table. This is a proposal for the Cole-Weissman Foundation, funded with an initial endowment of $50 million from the German government and private donors, empowered to authenticate claims, facilitate returns, and document the history of the railroad network, structured to continue operating indefinitely regardless of what happens to any individual member. Marcus read the document slowly. Professional language, legal frameworks, financial structures, everything necessary to transform his father's secret mission into a permanent institution. The foundation would be led by a board of directors. The representative continued, We propose that Marcus Cole and Hannah Weissman serve as founding directors with authority to appoint successors and establish policies. Sophia raised her hand. What about the next generation? What role would younger people play in the foundation's work? The representative smiled. We anticipated that question. The proposal includes provisions for a youth advisory council and internship programs designed to train the next generation of recovery specialists. Education is as important as restitution. Sophia looked at her father. This is what Grandpa wanted. Not just returning items, building something that lasts. I know. Then we should do it. We should build it. Marcus looked at Hannah, at Dr. Sterling, at the representatives who had traveled from around the world to honor his father's legacy. My father spent 30 years working alone, keeping secrets, carrying burdens that no one knew about. He picked up the foundation proposal. He did this because he believed that some jobs are too important to abandon, that some promises must be kept even when keeping them costs everything. He signed the document. The Cole Weissman Foundation will continue his work. It will honor his memory, and it will ensure that families who have been waiting 70 years for justice will finally receive it. Hannah signed next, then Dr. Sterling, then representatives from each organization present. When the signing was complete, applause filled the conference room. But Marcus barely heard it. He was thinking about his father, about the letter hidden in Engine 552, about the promise passed from generation to generation. I wish he could see this, Marcus said quietly. Hannah placed her hand on his arm. He can. Wherever he is, whatever comes after this life, he knows what we've done. He knows that his work was not in vain. How can you be sure? Because that's what faith means, Mr. Cole. Trusting that what we do matters even when we can't see the results. Your father had that faith. So did mine. And now we carry it forward. The foundation launched officially 6 weeks later. News coverage was extensive. Families from around the world contacted the organization, sharing stories of items lost during the Holocaust and hoping for returns. Museums reviewed their collections. Auction houses examined their records. The ripple effects of what Marcus's father had protected spread across continents. But the moment that mattered most came on a quiet Tuesday afternoon in Ridgemont. Marcus stood beside Engine 552, restored to its original 1943 appearance and installed as the centerpiece of the William Cole Memorial Holocaust Education Center. The building had been constructed on the site of Henderson's salvage yard, transformed from a place where discarded things went to be forgotten into a place where rescued treasures would be remembered forever. Sophia stood beside him along with Pete Morrison, Hannah Weissman, Jake Harrison, and the other SEALs who had helped complete the mission. Dr. Sterling addressed the crowd of several hundred people who had gathered for the dedication ceremony. We are here today to honor a man who spent 30 years protecting other people's heritage, a man who worked in secret because secrecy was necessary, a man who trusted that someday someone would come to finish what he started. She gestured toward Engine 552. This locomotive was the heart of the railroad network. It carried stolen treasures from Nazi transport trains to hidden caches across 3 states. It protected evidence that would eventually expose 70 years of crimes. And it waited patiently for the right person to discover its secrets. Marcus stepped forward to address the crowd. My father never asked for recognition. He never wanted credit. He just believed that some jobs are too important to abandon, that some promises have to be kept even when keeping them costs everything. He looked at the locomotive. 3 months ago, I spent my last $3,500 to buy this train. Everyone thought I was crazy. My daughter thought I was crazy. I thought I was crazy. Laughter rippled through the crowd. But my father had left me a message, a letter hidden inside this locomotive waiting for me to find it. He told me about the mission he had protected. He told me about the families still waiting for justice. And he trusted me to finish what he started. Marcus paused, emotion tightening his throat. Today, 70 families have been reunited with their heritage. Millions of dollars in stolen assets have been recovered. A man who spent 40 years threatening and intimidating survivors is in federal prison, and a foundation exists to continue this work for generations to come. He looked at Sophia. My daughter asked me once how long this mission would take. I told her as long as it takes. But now I understand what my father really meant. The mission doesn't end with us. It continues through our children and everyone who believes that some things are worth protecting. Sophia stepped forward to stand beside her father. My grandfather spent 30 years carrying a secret that weighed on him every day. My father spent 2 years lost in grief before he found that secret and understood what it meant. And I spent my whole life not knowing that I came from a family of guardians. She looked at the crowd. But now I know, and I'm not going to forget. The Cole Weissman Foundation will continue this work. We will find every family still searching. We will return every item that can be returned. We will document every story that deserves to be remembered. She placed her hand on Engine 552's restored side. My grandfather believed that some trains carry more than freight. He was right. This train carried hope. It carried justice. It carried the promise that what was stolen would eventually come home. The dedication ceremony concluded with the ringing of Engine 552's restored bell. The sound carried across Ridgemont the same sound that had echoed through rail yards 80 years ago. It rang 12 times once for each original member of the railroad network. And then it fell silent. But its message continued to resonate. Marcus stood beside his daughter, surrounded by the people who had helped complete his father's mission. "It's over," Sophia said softly. "No, it's not over. It's just transformed into something else." Marcus smiled. "Something that will outlive all of us." "Grandpa would like that." "Your grandmother would like it too. She always said that the best way to honor the dead is to help the living." "Is that what we're doing, helping the living?" Marcus looked at the education center, at the families who had come from around the world to witness the dedication, at the locomotive that had carried so much and waited so long. "We're keeping promises," he said. "That's what our family does. We keep promises that other people forget. We protect things that other people abandon. We finish what other people start." Sophia leaned against her father's shoulder. "Then I guess we'll be busy for a while." "For a lifetime." "Good, because I can't think of anything better to do with mine." The sun set over Ridgemont as the dedication ceremony ended. Orange and gold light painted Engine 552 the same colors that had illuminated sunsets over this town for a century. Generations had lived and died under that light. Families had been destroyed and rebuilt. Hope had flickered and burned bright again. And in a small Ohio town, a family of guardians had proven that some promises are worth keeping across generations. That some treasures cannot be measured in gold. That some trains carry more than freight. And that justice, however long delayed, eventually arrives. 6 months after the dedication ceremony, Marcus Cole received a phone call that nearly stopped his heart. "Mr. Cole, this is Agent Martinez. Carl Richter escaped federal custody 3 hours ago. Marcus gripped the phone so hard his knuckles turned white. "How?" "Inside help. 2 guards were bribed. He had a vehicle waiting outside the transport van." Martinez's voice was tight with fury. "We're tracking him now, but he had a significant head start." "Where's Sophia?" "We've already dispatched agents to Georgetown. She's being moved to a secure location as we speak." Marcus was already reaching for his car keys. "He's coming for us. He's going to try to finish what he started." "That's our assessment. We've got teams converging on Ridgemont, but you need to get somewhere safe until we locate him." "I'm not hiding. Not from him. Not anymore." "Mr. Cole, this isn't a request. Richter has nothing left to lose. He's already facing life in prison. Whatever he's planning, it won't be subtle." Marcus ended the call and immediately dialed Jake. "I heard," Jake said before Marcus could speak. "Danny's already tracking Richter's phone. Miguel is en route to Georgetown to personally ensure Sophia's safety." "Where is Richter now?" "Last ping was 40 minutes ago, heading west on I-70. He's coming to Ohio." "He's coming to Ridgemont. He's coming for the education center." "The evidence is already public. What could he possibly gain?" Marcus thought about Richter's face in the courtroom, the hatred in his eyes, the obsession that had consumed 3 generations of his family. This isn't about gaining anything. This is about destroying everything. If he can't have what his grandfather stole, he'll make sure no one else has it either. The locomotive, the archives, the foundation records. All of it. He wants to burn it to the ground. Jake's voice hardened. "Then we stop him. Same as always. Get Pete Morrison. Get everyone from the network who's still in the area. We're going to protect what my father built." "Marcus, the FBI is handling this." "The FBI wasn't there when my father spent 30 years keeping these secrets safe. The FBI wasn't there when his network risked everything to protect families they'd never met. This is our responsibility. This is our mission." "Understood. I'll have everyone at the education center within the hour." Marcus drove to Ridgemont faster than he had ever driven in his life. The education center was quiet when he arrived. Closed for the evening, Engine 552 sitting silently in the main hall. But within 30 minutes, vehicles began arriving. Pete Morrison, Jake and Danny, half a dozen other people Marcus had met over the past 6 months, descendants of network members who had answered the call. Mrs. Patterson arrived last, carrying her leather satchel of documents. "I heard that monster escaped," she said, her 87-year-old voice carrying the steel of a woman who had survived worse. "I'm not letting him destroy what William Cole protected." "Mrs. Patterson, this could be dangerous." "Everything worth protecting is dangerous, young man. I didn't live this long by running from fights that mattered." Danny set up surveillance equipment while Jake coordinated defensive positions. The education center had never been designed as a fortress, but they did what they could with what they had. Marcus's phone rang again. Sophia. Dad, they told me what happened. They want me to stay in Washington, but I need to be there. Absolutely not. Richter is dangerous, and he's specifically targeting our family, which is exactly why I need to be there. This is our mission, Dad. Our responsibility. You can't protect Grandpa's legacy without me. I can protect you by keeping you safe. Safe where in some FBI bunker while everything we've built gets destroyed. Sophia's voice cracked. Mom spent 2 years dying while we watched. I'm not going to spend tonight watching from a distance while you fight alone. Marcus closed his eyes. His daughter's words echoed Elena's voice. The same determination, the same refusal to be sheltered from what mattered. Miguel will bring you, but you stay back from any confrontation. Understood? Understood. I mean it, Sophia. If something happens to you, nothing's going to happen to me. We're going to stop Richter, and then we're going to keep doing what Grandpa started. That's how this story ends. Marcus ended the call and turned to find Pete Morrison watching him. She sounds like her grandfather, Pete said. William never backed down from a fight either. That's what worries me. It shouldn't. Courage isn't weakness, Marcus. It's the only reason any of us are here tonight. Danny's voice cut through the moment. I've got Richter's vehicle. He's 20 minutes out, approaching from the south. He's alone. Alone? No backup, no security team, just him. Jake frowned. That doesn't make sense. He knows we'll be waiting. He knows the FBI is looking for him. Why would he come alone? Marcus thought about Richter's face in the courtroom. The defeat, the rage, the resignation. Because he doesn't expect to survive this. He's not planning an escape. He's planning a final statement. What kind of statement? The kind that takes us with him. The realization hit everyone simultaneously. Richter wasn't coming to fight, he was coming to destroy, and a man with nothing to lose was the most dangerous enemy of all. Everyone out, Marcus ordered. Clear the building. Get to a safe distance. We're not leaving you, Jake said firmly. Richter might have explosives. He might have accelerants. Whatever he's bringing, it's designed to take this place down. Then we stop him before he gets inside. And if we can't, then we make sure he doesn't take anyone with him. Jake's eyes held Marcus's. We've survived worse together. This is just one more mission. They positioned themselves around the education center's entrance, hidden but ready. Danny tracked Richter's approach on his laptop, updating his position every 30 seconds. 15 minutes. 10 minutes. 5 minutes. Marcus watched the road, his body coiled with tension. 20 years of combat training screamed at him to engage to neutralize the threat before it could materialize. But Richter was a civilian, and this was American soil, and the rules were different here. Headlights appeared in the distance. A single vehicle moving slowly, deliberately, as if Richter wanted them to see him coming. The car stopped 50 yards from the education center's entrance. Carl Richter stepped out. He looked different than Marcus remembered. Thinner, older, the expensive suits replaced by prison clothes and a jacket that hung loosely on his frame, but his eyes still held the same cold determination, and in his hand he carried a device that made Marcus's blood freeze. A detonator. I know you're watching Cole. Richter's voice carried across the distance. I know you've called your friends, your FBI contacts, everyone who helped you destroy my family. Marcus stepped forward, hands visible. Put down the detonator, Richter. It's over. It's over. Richter laughed, a sound without humor. Nothing is over. Not for me, not for you, not for anyone. The evidence is already public. Your grandfather's crimes are documented. Destroying this building won't change anything. You're wrong. Destroying this building will demonstrate that some people don't surrender, that some families fight to the end, that the Richter name will be remembered for something other than defeat. Your grandfather was a murderer, a thief. He stole from families who trusted him, then helped send them to their deaths. That's what the Richter name means. That's what it will always mean. Richter's face contorted with rage. My grandfather was a patriot. He served his country. He protected German heritage from Stolzheit, from Jewish families who had every right to their own property, from children who never got to grow up, from grandparents who died in gas chambers while your grandfather cataloged their belongings. Lies? All lies. The truth. Documented by your own grandfather, signed in his own hand. Heinrich Richter kept records of every crime he committed, and those records survived because men like my father believed that justice would eventually come. Richter's hand tightened on the detonator. Your father was a traitor. He stole what belonged to Germany. My father protected what belonged to the families your grandfather murdered, and he did it for 30 years in secret without recognition because he believed that some promises are worth keeping. Pretty words won't save you tonight, Cole. I'm not trying to save myself. I'm trying to give you a choice. Marcus took another step forward. You can press that button and destroy a building. Maybe kill a few people. And then what the Foundation continues. The evidence remains public. The families keep receiving their heritage. Nothing you do tonight changes any of that. I don't care about changing things. I care about making a statement. What statement? That you're willing to die for a lie that 3 generations of Richters couldn't face the truth about what their family did. The truth is whatever the victors decide it is. No, the truth is what survives. And your grandfather's truth has survived for 80 years, waiting for someone to bring it into the light. Richter's composure finally cracked. Tears streamed down his face, but his hand remained steady on the detonator. I spent my whole life protecting his legacy. My father did the same. We believed we were defending our family's honor. And then you destroyed everything with documents that should have been burned decades ago. The documents weren't destroyed because men like my father believed they mattered. They believed that families deserved to know what happened. They believed that justice was worth waiting for. Justice? Richter spat the word. What justice is there? For me, I lose everything. My fortune, my freedom, my family's name. And you become a hero. I'm not a hero. I'm just a man who found something my father left behind and decided to finish what he started. Then I'll finish what my grandfather started. Richter raised the detonator, and Marcus made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He charged, not toward Richter, but toward the education center, toward the archives, toward the evidence that his father had spent 30 years protecting. Dad, no, Sophia's voice. She had arrived without him noticing, was running toward him from the opposite direction. Everything happened simultaneously. Jake tackled Richter from behind. The detonator flew from Richter's hand. An explosion hocked the education center's south wall. Marcus felt the shockwave hit him like a fist, throwing him forward, sending him tumbling across the ground. Darkness. Then light. Then Sophia's face above him, tears streaming, hands pressed against his chest. Dad, stay with me. Stay with me. The archives. Forget the archives. You're hurt. Marcus tried to sit up and felt pain lance through his entire body. He looked down at his chest, saw blood seeping through his shirt. Shrapnel, he said. Small pieces. Not deep. Not deep? Dad, you're bleeding everywhere. I've had worse. When... Afghanistan. Twice. Maybe 3 times. Sophia laughed through her tears. This isn't funny. No, but I'm alive, and you're alive, and Richter... He looked past his daughter and saw Jake standing over Carl Richter's unconscious form. Danny was already on the phone with emergency services. Pete Morrison was organizing the others to assess damage to the building. He's alive, Jake called out. Unconscious but alive. The FBI can have him back. The explosion, contained to the south wall. The main structure is intact. Engine 552 is undamaged. Marcus closed his eyes and felt relief wash through him. The archives. The locomotive. The Foundation's heart. All of it survived. Dad, Sophia's voice pulled him back. Don't close your eyes. Stay with me. I'm not going anywhere, just resting. You're going to a hospital, right now. After I know everything's secure. Everything's secure. You won, Dad. We won. It's over. Marcus opened his eyes and looked at his daughter, at the strength in her face, at the determination that had carried her through so much loss. Your mother would be proud of you. She'd be furious at you for charging toward an explosion. That too. Sirens in the distance, FBI vehicles arriving, paramedics rushing toward him with equipment and urgency. Mr. Cole, we need to get you to a hospital. In a minute. Sir, you're bleeding. In a minute. Marcus pushed himself to a sitting position despite the pain. He looked at the education center, at the damage to the south wall, at the smoke still rising from where Richter's device had detonated. Then he looked at Engine 552 visible through the broken wall, standing silent and proud in the main hall. The locomotive had survived worse. His father had survived worse. The mission had survived worse. And so had he. Okay, Marcus said finally. Hospital. The paramedics loaded him onto a stretcher and began treating his wounds. As they carried him toward the ambulance, Marcus saw FBI agents taking Carl Richter into custody. The German was conscious now, his face blank with the expression of a man who had finally run out of options. Their eyes met for a moment. Marcus expected hatred, expected rage, expected some final threat or promise of revenge. Instead, he saw something that looked almost like relief. Richter's war was over, and so was Marcus's. 3 months later, Marcus stood beside Engine 552 as the education center celebrated its reconstruction. The south wall had been rebuilt stronger than before. New security systems had been installed. The archives had been digitized and distributed to partner institutions around the world, ensuring that no single attack could ever destroy the evidence again, and the foundation had grown beyond anything Marcus had imagined. 117 families had now received returns. Museums in 6 countries had voluntarily surrendered items with questionable provenance. The German government had increased its restitution fund to $300 million. Universities were teaching courses about the railroad network's history. His father's secret mission had become a global movement. Sophia stood beside him home from Georgetown for the ceremony. She had just completed her first semester earning top grades, while also serving as the Foundation's youth ambassador. "I have news," she said. "Good news. Depends on your definition." She pulled out an envelope. The Weissman Family Archives in Massachusetts. Hannah's team found additional documentation. There are more families, more caches, more items waiting to be returned. How many more? At least 30, maybe more. The railroad network was larger than anyone realized. There are still people out there, Dad. People like Pete Morrison and Hannah Weissman who've been waiting for someone to come asking questions. Marcus absorbed this information. More families, more treasures, more mission. Then we find them, all of them. That could take years. That could take a lifetime. Is that okay with you? Marcus looked at his daughter, at the woman she was becoming, at the legacy she was carrying forward. It's more than okay. It's exactly what your grandfather would have wanted. Dr. Sterling approached them with a smile. The ceremony is about to begin. Ruth Goldberg's family is here. They want to say something. They walked together to the main hall where several hundred people had gathered. Families who had received returns. Network descendants. Scholars and journalists and officials from around the world. Ruth Goldberg sat in the front row, her grandmother's ring gleaming on her finger. At 92, she had become the Foundation's most beloved spokesperson, traveling the world to share her story and encourage other families to keep searching. She rose slowly when Marcus approached. "Mr. Cole, when we first met, I told you that I had waited 74 years for my grandmother's ring. What I didn't tell you was that I had given up hope. I had accepted that I would die without ever feeling her presence again." Ruth took Marcus's hands in hers. "But then you came. You and your daughter. You brought me my grandmother's blessing. You proved that some promises are worth keeping across generations." She turned to face the crowd. "Today I want to make a promise of my own. I promise that as long as I have breath in my body, I will tell this story. The story of railroad men who protected strangers' heritage. The story of families who never stopped searching. The story of justice that took 80 years but finally arrived." Ruth's voice grew stronger. "And I promise that when I'm gone, others will continue telling this story. Because some stories are too important to forget. Because some truths are too precious to bury. Because some promises must be kept even when the people who made them are no longer here." Applause filled the hall. Marcus looked around at the faces of people who had been touched by his father's mission. Survivors and descendants, scholars and activists, ordinary people who had learned that they could make a difference by protecting what mattered. His father had spent 30 years working in secret. Now his legacy was being celebrated by the world. "Mr. Cole?" A voice from behind. "Agent Martinez. I thought you'd want to know. Carl Richter received his final sentence this morning. Life in prison without possibility of parole, plus additional charges for the escape and the attack on the education center. How did he react? Quietly, almost peacefully. I think he's finally accepted that it's over." Marcus nodded slowly. "It's over for him. But for the families he tried to rob, it's just beginning." That's one way to look at it. That's the only way to look at it. Justice isn't about punishment, it's about restoration. Richter going to prison doesn't give families back what they lost. The Foundation does that. The returns do that. The stories we tell and preserve do that. Martinez smiled. "Your father would be proud. My father would say there's more work to be done. There's always more work to be done." "Yes, there is." The ceremony continued for another hour. Speeches, presentations, a documentary screening about the railroad network's history. and at the end the ringing of Engine 552's bell, 12 times, once for each original network member, and then a 13th time for Marcus. "What was that for?" Sophia asked. "I don't know. I didn't authorize it." Pete Morrison appeared beside them, smiling. "I authorized it. You've earned it, son. You've become part of the network now, part of the legacy that will continue long after we're all gone." Marcus felt emotion tighten his throat. "I didn't do anything special. I just found what my father left and decided to finish it." "That's exactly what's special. Most people find secrets and bury them. You found a secret and brought it into the light. You took a responsibility that could have crushed you and turned it into something beautiful." "I had help. Sophia, Jake, you, Dr. Sterling, Hannah Weissman, everyone who answered the call. That's how it works. That's how it's always worked. One person starts something, others join, and eventually the mission becomes bigger than any individual. That's what your father understood. That's what he was counting on." The crowd began to disperse. Families tunneled saying goodbye. Journalists filing stories. Officials returning to their responsibilities. But Marcus stayed beside Engine 552. Sophia stayed with him. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "About your grandfather. About all the nights he must have stood beside this locomotive wondering if anyone would ever understand what he was protecting." "He understood. That's why he left the letter. That's why he trusted you." "He trusted me to finish the mission, but I don't think even he imagined it would grow into this." "Maybe he did. Maybe that's exactly what he was hoping for." Sophia leaned against the locomotive. "Maybe he knew that once the truth came out, it would spread, that other families would come forward, that the mission would become bigger than one person or one network." "You think he planned all of this?" "I think he planted seeds and trusted that someone would water them. That's what faith is, right? Trusting that what you do matters even when you can't see the results." Marcus touched the locomotive's side. The metal was warm from the hall's lights, almost alive. "Your grandmother used to say that the best way to honor the dead is to help the living." "I remember." "She also used to say that love isn't a feeling, it's a choice you make every day even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." "Is that what this is, love?" Marcus looked at his daughter, at the foundation they had built, at the families they had helped, and the families they would continue to help. It's what your grandfather felt for strangers he'd never meet, what your grandmother felt for a community that needed her, what your mother felt for us even when she was dying. He paused. "It's what I feel for you, and what I hope you'll feel for the next generation when it's your turn to pass this on." "I will, I promise." "I know." They stood together in silence as the last visitors departed, and the education center prepared to close for the evening. Jake approached them one final time. "Everything's secure. Danny's running final checks on the new security systems. Pete's locking up the archives. We're good for the night. Thank you for everything from the beginning. You'd do the same for me. You have done the same for me." Jake gripped Marcus's shoulder. "Get some rest. The mission will be here tomorrow." "The mission will be here forever." "That's the idea." Jake left. Marcus and Sophia walked slowly toward the exit, passing displays documenting the Foundation's work. Photographs of returned items, letters from grateful families, testimonials from survivors who had finally received justice. And at the center of it all, a portrait of William Cole, smiling, young, standing beside Engine 552 in 1947. "He looks happy," Sophia said. "He was happy, even with everything he was carrying, even with all the secrets and responsibilities. He found joy in the work." "Did you find joy in it?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "I found purpose. After your mother died, I thought I'd never feel alive again. I thought the grief would consume me. But then I found the locomotive, found the letter, found the mission, and somewhere along the way I found myself again." "That's not joy. Maybe it is. Maybe joy isn't about happiness. Maybe it's about meaning. About knowing that what you do matters. About being connected to something larger than yourself. Grandpa's legacy. Everyone's legacy. The network members, the families, the survivors, everyone who contributed to this mission across 80 years. Marcus looked at his daughter. "And now, your legacy, whatever you build on this foundation, whatever you pass on to the next generation." They reached the exit and paused. "Dad, can I ask you something? Anything. When you bought the locomotive, did you know? Did you have any idea what you were getting into?" Marcus thought about that morning 6 months ago, standing in Henderson's salvage yard, holding a check for $3,500, betting everything on a feeling he couldn't explain. No, I didn't know. I just felt something, a pull, a certainty that there was more to that train than rust and decay. I couldn't explain it then. I'm not sure I can explain it now. Faith? Maybe, or maybe something simpler. Maybe just a son who missed his father and wanted to understand what he'd spent his life protecting. And now you understand. Marcus looked back at Engine 552 standing silent in the hall, carrying 80 years of secrets and 70 families' heritage and the legacy of men who believed that some promises are worth keeping. Now I understand everything. They walked out into the night. Behind them, Engine 552 waited. The bell was silent, but its message continued. Some trains carry more than freight. Some secrets are worth protecting. Some promises take generations to keep. And some families find their purpose in protecting others' heritage even when the world calls them crazy. Marcus Cole had been a broken veteran with nothing left to lose. Now he was the guardian of a legacy that would outlive him. His father had trusted him with that responsibility. His daughter would carry it forward. And somewhere across the veil that separates the living from the dead, William Cole smiled. The mission was not complete. The mission would never be complete. But it was in good hands, and that was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything. The next morning, Marcus returned to the education center and found Sophia already there reviewing the Weissman family archives. She looked up as he entered. Ready to find more families? Always. Good, because I've identified 7 possible cache sites we haven't explored yet. 3 in New England, 2 in Pennsylvania, 2 more that might be in Canada. Canada. The network extended further than anyone realized. Some refugees fled north after the war. They took their responsibilities with them. Marcus sat down beside his daughter and began reviewing the documents she'd assembled. New families, new treasures, new stories waiting to be uncovered. The mission continued. And it always would. Because some things are too important to abandon, because some promises must be kept, because some trains carry more than freight. Engine 552 had waited 70 years for Marcus Cole to discover her secrets. Now she waited for the next generation, and the generation after that, and every generation that would follow. Her bell would ring again, and her promise would endure. Forever.